What's up, y'all? I'm gonna throw this capo on the 3rd fret, and I'm gonna do a little intro with Frank the guitar here. That's what we're gonna leave it at. Unorthodox and untraditional as I am, as we are here. This is In the Image Clothing Company podcast. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. Here at the podcast side of things, we have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. Before I get any farther into this, I want to say, normally I won't have episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast be about things like these last two are. For example, this is episode 60 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. This is titled Workouts. And episode 59 was titled Running. Two things that I, as a company, feel we have to include in the podcast. I talk about them on the main side, and we talk about them and as we do, and I'll get into a little bit of layouts of what our company is before I really get into this discussion of workouts. But I want to make it very clear, that's the whole point of this podcast, is to have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. In the Image Clothing Company podcast. That's what we do. And so I'm not straying from that in ways that I'm trying to do on my own, because I was battling our God before this, as I just came back from playing volleyball tonight, and I played volleyball last night as well within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We get together and do things, and last night and tonight, volleyball was a thing that I was able to be involved in. It was awesome. I really enjoy playing volleyball, but I just don't feel right about it, personally, me, but that's out of my flesh, which seems kind of backwards, because I'm getting very much prompted to include this topic in the Image Clothing Company podcast's library, because the podcast is numbered. The podcast will never change once I put one out, or else we're missing one, right? You go from episode, like, just an example, right? Hypothetical. Episode 15 to episode 17, and we skip one if I decide I didn't want it there out or something, So I'm being very intentional on praying through the episodes of the podcast and only making podcasts on what and how and if and when I should. But there's a couple things that we got to really, really discuss. We are in the Image Clothing Company, and I guess I'll just transition right into, we'll talk about here for a minute or two, probably a few minutes, as we do within the intros, what In the Image Clothing Company is. And that's the whole thing. We address the human body's natural function. Natural and neutral are synonyms within the human body. The body really only has one way that it operates. It's just a machine in the ways that it is. It's a mechanical machine coming at it from the skeletal system and the musculature operating the skeletal system. It's a machine that digests food and uses nutrients from things that we put into our bodies. It's a machine that pumps blood through the whole thing like a plumber would be operating on water systems. It's a machine that breathes in oxygen and turns it into a different state of gas and exhales carbon dioxide in the ways that it does that. The body's just a machine. It only does what it does. We think about speaking, and all we're doing when we're speaking is just making sounds that we can then associate with a certain meaning, and we can understand other human beings and what they're trying to say to us. The body is just a fleshly, operable machine. And the function that I focus on the most is that it's just a mechanical machine. Because within In the Image Clothing Company, we address the skeletal system. It's not about the fat content or the muscle mass. When we're trying to get the body to just work, and in the Image Clothing Company, under, around, through, all of everything that we are, the key word, and hear this correct and hear this good before you hear anything else I say within this discussion on workouts, the key word is always allow the body to work within In the Image Clothing Company. We did not design our bodies. We didn't decide how the hand works. It doesn't matter about looking at other human beings. Look at your own body. You didn't decide how your hand is structured. You didn't decide how your shoulder capsule works. You didn't decide how your jaw will sit. You didn't decide how your pelvis operates, which is your hips, right? As this whole structure, the whole big bone that's your waist. You didn't decide how your knee hinges or your elbow hinges. You didn't decide where the neutral parts of your body are, like the neutral wrist or the neutral position of the pelvis, the neutral position of the jaw, of the spine. Those are some of the major ones. We didn't decide how our feet operate, and they're complex, really. We didn't decide how our bodies would stand the most efficiently. And we didn't decide how gravity affects our bodies. We didn't decide that there's going to be a center to the body with no dispute, no opinion, and no yoga class because there's a spine there that's fed from the brain through the brainstem with a nervous system that then goes out through the whole body. The body's an electrical system, like wiring a house so that lights can come on. There's nerve endings that go through the whole body that allow us to have the sense of touch. We didn't decide how any of that works within our own bodies. We don't need to look at anybody else. We live in a modern 2025. Today is the 15th of February. Oh, today is, well, it's past midnight, but today was, for me, I'm still just awake, Valentine's Day, the holiday, which doesn't matter. It's just another day. I could say that for any holiday other than Christmas because that's just celebrating the birth of our living God. That's an entirely different thing. It's not a holiday. Christmas isn't a holiday. Don't believe me. Oh, that's a good time to mention that. I always say when I do, just meaning that's my intention and I vocalize it a lot within In The Image Clothing Company or just anything in my own personal life, being Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, I always say, don't believe me. It's not about me. I can't decide what's true. I can't change what is true. Truth is apart from us. It's unchanging. Our living God, Jesus the Christ, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he is the way, the truth, and the life. If you have a problem with the gospel of Jesus Christ, either I'm not going to give you a choice because I'm not going to try to push anybody away. The whole point of the gospel is bringing people to Christ. It's not about me. That's what I'm saying. So if you got a problem with the gospel of Jesus Christ, stick around. That's a little bit backwards, but that's it's the truth of all things. Don't believe me, but it is. So we didn't decide how our bodies work, and our focus really is the structural skeletal system of the body because all the musculature of the body does, this is something so massively huge to hear. This is no opinion of mine. This isn't my way of trying to approach something because I've believed it or thought about it or something. I don't have beliefs. I don't have opinions. I don't care. I want truth, and that's what we say here at In The Image Clothing Company and through, around, under In The Image Clothing Company. We speak universal, eternal truths. And myself, just as every other human being, we are all equals. And we're sinful by nature. We discuss the fall of Adam a lot within the podcast here in the Image Clothing Company podcast. And the whole point of a human being and being in this state that we're in is to be something that's conditional, something that messes up, something that needs help, something that will never understand the life that it's currently living fully, so that we have to rely on our living God, Jesus Christ, the perfect one, the almighty, no limit being that he is, knowing everything from beginning to end, creating everything, creating us. And we have to look to him because we will never know everything in this life. We will never be perfect in this life. And I, as the founder, Evan Strong, of In The Image Clothing Company, as I say so often and so boldly that we discuss universal, unchanging, undisputed truths, we do. But that doesn't mean that me as a human being is going to say every word exactly correct and know every single thing about everything that I ever talk about, because I will not. That is just a undisputed truth in itself. I will never relay anything perfectly. I will never understand anything to its full depth because there's some things in this life that just get so deep. And there's just so many things. We're just not going to know everything ever in this life, right? I mean, I can't speak for beyond because I'm not there yet. And that's, again, the point of being a human being. So faith, right? Having faith, knowing that our God really is there and he really is who he says he is within the Bible, within the Book of Mormon. If you're coming into this with preconceived ideas of what you believe about those two things, those two books, those two passages of scripture, those two books of doctrine, those two ways of knowing who our living God really is, because his word itself is alive, then please don't have your own opinions about things that will, because they will prevent you from just seeing things as they are. And that's what we're trying to do. Again, I'm never going to do it perfect, but that's what I'm trying to do. Being the leader of this company, the founder of this company, the one that's giving all this information, you don't got to believe me, but truth manifests itself within you. And if you let it, right? If you can put your own preconceived ideas aside, as I try to, and as I pray to have happen through me. But we have to be able to do that because sometimes we're so set and so certain on something being some way. Somebody's told us it, or we just think it, or we want it to be that, or we just have a strong belief about something. But beliefs change, hopes change, desires change, wants change, things that we're into and interested in change. The truth and our living God, Jesus the Christ himself, never, ever, ever change. He never changes. So he's apart from me. Truth is apart from me. Things as they are apart from me. But me, being somebody just relaying things, even if I have a pretty darn deep understanding of it, I never could have a perfect understanding of it. So, good context. Let's get into this. In the Image Clothing Company has 3 sides. You know what this is. I've given enough context to it. We also have in the Image Clothing Company, the main side of things, as I word it, where I discuss the anatomy of the human body. I personally, really, truly, don't believe me, but I do know the human body in depth. I know how to, and what it takes to, and what is needed to allow the human body to work. We're all designed the same. That's what our company name is. In the Image Clothing Company, it's all one word, it's all together, but the first 3 words, we are designed in the image of our living God himself. Jesus the Christ designed our bodies in his image. So again, we don't change. The human body is always going to be as it is. It's always going to be the same. Thousands of years back, thousands of years in the future. Again, as I mentioned, but if this is your first time within hearing In the Image Clothing Company at all, or just the podcast maybe, I could see that being the case for this episode for many people because of what it is, talking about workouts and how we have all these bold things we say about the body only works how it does, and you're wasting your time doing things, and I get so bold and so sounding opinionated, but I'm not. I'm trying in every sense to keep every opinion of mine out of everything that I talk about in life, just that's my own personal doings, but within In the Image Clothing Company, because that's public. So we're just talking about things as they are. Again, I mess up, and I always will. But yeah, we have information on the body's anatomy, and I talk about it as it is, and I really get down to the truth of how to allow the body to work, and we get down to why people are in such turmoil physically nowadays. People are in so much physical pain, and their bodies are just so altered. I talk about how we're always seeing these chronic patternings. It happens across the globe, and it always will in the ways that it does. Any part of our earth, it happens to a human being. If you place an item of anything on your physical person, the human body, as I discussed it, just being a mechanical machine, clothing is just something placed onto it. And so a shirt, for example, all you're doing when you're wearing a shirt is holding it off the ground with your body. We don't think about it that way, but there's no opinion to it. That's just all that's happening. Pants, same thing. We're just holding them off the ground. If they're not touching the ground, it's your body that's holding it up. And it's not your hand that's meant to do gripping motions, but it's your hips in some way. And usually it's, in most people's cases, a position that's not how the hips would work. And so it's altering them. So same with shoes. Laces are huge. Anytime you're introducing ropes to the human body, it just alters it to such a degree. If we're not keeping everything centered, again, the body just has a center line. It has to. Gravity pulls us down, straight, to the center of the earth. And the human body has a spine with 2 sides to it. It has a sternum, this big bone in the front of the rib cage, has a nose. Those are the 3 things that I focus on when I talk about the center of the body, because there's no dispute to have the body needing to stay centered. Otherwise, if it's out of alignment at all, in any way, the body will have to use so much of it to compensate. If there's anything that's altered in the body, anything, it can be really small, like part of your finger and only one of them, something else, and many things within the body will have to do some sort of compensation because the body only actually works as a whole. Now, before I get into anything else, I understand deformities, I understand amputations and major surgeries and life-altering things to your physical body that are in your control because something you did or a mistake that happened, but still something that was caused by something you did, or something entirely out of your control, a birth defect or an accident that was somebody else had the, was the deliverer of what happened to you. Like, you can have anything on any end of everything. And so I'm not trying to in any way talk down on somebody, condemn anybody. There's no, in any slight, any kind of no way shaming that In the Image Clothing Company does, has done, or ever will do to anybody's body shape or capability because of their own specific case. No way are we ever doing those things at all, regardless of what it sounds like. I've said since the very beginning of In the Image Clothing Company, since before I founded the company, actually. I was making videos just by myself under my own name. And I always was saying and still say and always will be the case with In the Image Clothing Company. You have to hear what we are saying, not what you are hearing, not what you've heard in the past, not what you think is coming out of my mouth as the founder, Evan Strong, not what you think about any one of the team members as the team builds, anything they're saying or anything you think. You have to hear what we are saying. You don't get to interpret somebody else's words if they've said something different than what you think your interpretation is. Okay, we look at things as they are. Again, we mess up. We interpret things because we're human beings when really we should just see things as they are. We all do it. I mess up. Everything that I'm saying within this that sounds like I'm just condemning others or talking down on people or saying you should know better. The reason and way that I was allowed to found In the Image Clothing Company and get to my level of understanding that I'm currently at of what I talk about and what this company is and just the truth of how the body works, it's come from my own personal experience of making mistakes. So when I say we're sinful by nature, I focus on my own self when I say that. You can check out past episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. I publicly share my own sins, my own mistakes, because we are human beings. And that's actually what builds our testimonies, is sharing the fact that we've messed up when other people know they have, but don't want to admit it or tell it to others because they feel like maybe we shouldn't. Because people try to get us to be perfect. We never will be. That's why we have a perfect God, as I said. So let's get into this. Well, the other third of our company is, right, we've got the main side, as I was discussing with the anatomy, but then we also talk about clothing. I share free modifications to do within your own clothing just to keep it centered. Not because I think you should do something to your clothing, but because the human body only works the way that it does. So everything we share over there within clothing is for the goal of allowing, keyword, the body to work. We will never get our bodies to do something they do not, because we did not design them. The goal is natural. The goal is just, hey, we're a human being born onto an earth, and before we had all these man-made things like the floorings that we do, the unnaturally flat things we hold in our hands, countertops, tables, desks, unnaturally heights of seats, right? In nature, you'd be sitting down on the ground like I am now. As far as I'm aware, except for the launch, which was the first episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, I'm pretty certain at this point, without like going back and figuring it out, that every single episode that I've filmed of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, up until this one, which is episode 60, I've been sitting on the ground because that's how the human body would sit in nature. Unless you had something around you to sit on, you'd sit on the earth that is always there because that's where we are. So these chair heights have become so unnatural, meaning the height that has been chosen is and always will be unnatural to sit in. And we'll get into talking about that as we do, and I have so many times, but maybe in this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, we'll get into quite a bit of that, but we talk about that. We always will. So just because it's the truth. So yeah, I will talk about the other third of our company, but I want to really hit the main side of the company a little bit deeper first. We talk about things that are not just clothing. You don't have to be into fashion because it's not about fashion. Within the Holy Bible, within passages of scripture, within the Book of Mormon, it talks a lot about like fine-twined linen and you know, expensive worldly way of looking at valued apparel, right? I mean, clothing that we wear. We don't need to put so much emphasis and focus on looking a certain way because we've acquired something that has been man-made, being clothing, that looks so great for our bodies to be seen because we're so fashionable. And I wear some things that look pretty well, pretty nice, pretty good. I do, I really do. And it's like, it's that balance where, yeah, sure, we gotta look, I don't want to phrase this in any kind of way incorrect because I don't want to have any kind of intention behind this. It's good to look nice. It's good to take care of your body that we've been given. But I've said since the founding of In the Image Clothing Company, as well as some of these other things I'm mentioning, I've said since the very beginning, to give some context, going into this deep discussion on something that could have so much opinion to it, and I don't want to have any within this. And so ideally that's what happens, and that's my intention, is to try to keep all my opinions out of what I talk about within this episode specifically. All of them, that's what I do, but this is a big one. For the sake of how opinionated people get on this. Yeah, but what I've said since the founding is, and even before, our clothing, and when we have In the Image Clothing Company clothing available, the whole point of it, the whole point of what we do within clothing through In the Image Clothing Company is to kind of almost make it so the clothing is not something we notice as much as the body's function. We're set apart under this company, under this family, under this community that is In the Image Clothing Company, because our bodies will be able to function, because that's the whole goal. That's the slogan, right? It is, but it doesn't, you don't need to care about our slogans. That's the whole goal, is we're helping people allow their body to do the only thing that it does. So the clothing isn't the focus, but the body's function will be seen, and it's because of what we're wearing and just the fact that we're doing all that we can to be very, 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 3 times intentional, just for the sake of, right, the Holy Trinity is 3. I mean, 3 is a number of completion in many ways. We're trying to just allow our bodies to just be as they are, as they're designed, and you have to be pretty intentional in 2025, and going forward, it'll only get higher degrees of that level of intentionality we will have to just allow our bodies to work. Things are so unnatural, and the body's natural. It always will be. It always is. There's no opinion to it. There's no belief behind it. And so we have a lot of unnatural things already, and things are just getting continually more man-made, more synthetic, more unnatural. They don't mesh with the body. Things seep into the body and alter it, like a topical cream, right? Again, no opinions to this, but it just is what it is. So we discuss sleeping naturally. We discuss eating naturally. We discuss what hydration actually means and how crazy out of touch, widespread and broad spread most all humans in 2025 are with what it means to be hydrated. People are drinking an immensely high level of excessive amounts of water to try to hydrate their body, and it's just not doing that. It's actually dehydrating you. The body has a balance that it does with all the things that it does by itself, but it can't be dysregulated by something we are doing to it, even if we're unaware of it. But we can't be held accountable for what we don't know. I'm going to reference a couple things real quick. As far as I'm aware, it's episode 16 and episode 17 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. One of them is titled Hydration Truths. One of them is titled Eating Truths. And I went into quite a bit, but there's so much more that I could have said then and could say now, and I'm just continually spreading information as I do through the podcast, for example, but then all sides of the company. But that's a good place to go for some of that. And then also, I just mentioned another thing that I was going to reference another episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. If I think of it, I do. If not, then that's fine. But yes, we discussed just how to do all these things naturally, the things that the body does, standing and sitting. We talk about the myths behind things, posture, and how the body really just only works how it does. And if there wasn't ever anything altering it, there'd be no such thing as bad posture, because the body would just be working. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Designed to Work. I went over how the body's designed to just do the only things that it does, and we can't tell it to do anything else, but also it's designed to actually work, to put forth effort, to stay activated through the whole entire body, because it only works as a whole. So if part of it's turned off, the rest of it has to do something else to try to continue to work differently than it would naturally do. Natural doesn't mean something as far as an opinion or a belief or a way of life or lifestyle. Natural is just, again, the only thing that it does. We didn't design it, so what's its natural state of working? And that's what we get to here. We discuss the actual truth behind these things. There's no opinion to what we say. Again, sinful by nature. I'm an opinionated human being just because naturally I have the desire to want to be right, as we all do, right? And so putting myself aside is what I'm trying to do within everything. But, I can't ever say anything perfectly, so I just won't. But yeah, so we discuss all the things that the body does. Mostly physical functions, right? We don't talk about so much, at least, internal functions really, but but physical operations. And that's really what a human being is. It's a physical, fleshly being. So we really do talk about actually quite a variety of things within the human body. So, okay, that's the main side of the company, some context of what we get into. We get into a lot, really, truly we do. But then we have also another third, which is In the Image Clothing Company music. And similarly to the main side of In the Image Clothing Company and the whole slogan / goal behind what we do, allowing, keyword, the human body to work, I discuss setups of mostly guitars because that's what I play, to just allow the hands that only do what they do to mesh with playing a guitar, because that's a very specific thing to do, a lot of fine motor skills and a lot of little movements that happen there. And so the body's never going to do anything that it doesn't. We didn't design what it does do. So we show setups of guitars. I show positions of the body while we play guitars mostly, but then any instruments that we do get into as we go, and how, keeping the body in a neutral position. Neutral and natural are synonyms, right, within the human body, to sing and to just approach music the way that we do. And I also make music over there. So that's a lot of what we do on In the Image Clothing Company music. Now, this is huge. I say this within the intro of In the Image Clothing Company podcast when I make them, and we have 60 up until this point. So I discuss where clothing needs to sit on the human body. If you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're tall, short, skinny, fat, any age, if you're from this part of the globe or that part of the globe, if you lived 5,000 years ago, which you wouldn't be listening to this if you did, but it would still apply to you, or if you live 5,000 years in the future from today's date, which I said at the beginning, it will still apply. We discussed the skeletal system. It just only has its operations. Every single joint within the body is just two bones connecting. And they only do that the way they do. They only have the range of motion that they have, and they ideally need to be worked through those full ranges of motion. Otherwise, they're just using partial ranges of the functions that they have, and that in itself causes problems within the body. So it doesn't matter what you want to believe about you think you should have, especially within this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. People put on certain items of clothing to go do a workout, but then they'll put something else on through the rest of their lives or through other avenues of approaching what they're doing. My clothing that I wear, that you see me wear, being the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, Evan Strong, everything that I'm always wearing, anytime you ever see me, even if you never see me in person, but through, we have this podcast in visual plus audio and then only audio, so you can see me through the podcast on any side of the company or anything that we do through In the Image Clothing Company podcast, In the Image Clothing Company, the main side of things, In the Image Clothing Company music. You ever see me playing guitar or singing? If you ever see me in person, because that could happen as well. There'd be no reason it couldn't. Every time that I have clothing on, which is always, unless I'm showering, in my personal case, that is just how it is, okay? I mean, right, sure, times and places, but I'm pretty much always wearing clothing. The point being, anytime that I have clothing on, what I'm wearing is something that I am so extremely intentional about, okay? Like, to a degree that people would probably think is crazy if they're new to understanding what clothing's doing to the body, or just maybe some people would always think it's crazy. I'm so intentional about it because the whole thing is allowing the body to work in everything that we do. You can't only allow your body to do the only thing that it does through certain activities and then wear something else that's altering your body doing other things, because now you've altered your body. So it's altering the body when it's altering the body, meaning if it is, period, and done. So again, there's a center. It has to be there. Oversized clothing's damaging the body. If you have oversized clothing, it's something you're having to hold on to you. If you ever adjust your clothing, that means that it has gone out of a position that is the only way, period, that your body works. So I'm going to get pretty bold, okay? And I do. And so if I start to sound like I'm being accusacious or talking down on people, I am not. But I'm very, very bold. Naturally, that's who I am. And when I say these things, because there is no opinion to them, don't turn it off because it doesn't sound like something you want to hear. Because the reason I'm making these podcast episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, the reason why we have In the Image Clothing Company as a whole at all, is to share truth, to help human beings who are in physical pain, and to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ as well in everything that we do. because it's the truth of all things. Don't believe me, but it is. So the reason I say don't believe me, a little context for this episode by itself, in the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 60 on workouts. We can believe anybody we want or not believe anybody we want, but we can all have opinions if we want. Truth is apart from all of us, okay? As I mentioned, but furthering that explanation for this specifically, especially because of what this title is and what this discussion is, don't believe me on anything I say within workouts. So if anything that I approach this with, or any kind of discussion or description or explanation of the anatomy, explanation of how the body really actually does work, any of this, don't believe me as far as my words because I've said something. Because you can believe any human being, and there's people saying all this and that. But truth manifests itself to you. Truth is something that you can try yourself. You can understand yourself, as if I had never said it, or another human being said it. It's not about me, Evan Strong. Truthfully, it is not, because I can't convince somebody of something and have it just be what it is. There's only what there is, and it's just whoever delivers it to you happens to be who does that, and it doesn't have to be me. But I've been given the gift of knowledge and understanding of a lot of things. I'm really intellectual. I'm really smart. If that sounds prideful, cool. It's the truth. So I relay information, and I do it. But again, never perfectly. I want to just give a really good intro to this before we get into this. I've got great storage space. This might be a pretty long episode compared to some of the other ones up until this point, because I want this to be really just needing, it is, okay, see, I stutter over what I'm saying, because I don't want it to be anything. I tried to not make this. As I was coming home from playing volleyball earlier, I'm like, Father, I don't want the podcast to be anything other than the gospel of Jesus Christ. But we've done this now, meaning I've partnered with the Father, if you will. I didn't choose to do this. But 16 and 17, hydration and eating. 59 and 60, running and workouts, right? So back to back with these two titles and subjects and discussions that are very similar to each other, as far as these two and the other two right next to each other, so we can find them easily within going back through in the Image Clothing Company podcast and referencing them. So let's talk about this. Let's get into it. As I was saying, clothing, if it's oversized, if you're ever adjusting it, if it's falling off your body, if it's doing anything to your body, it's altering it. The upper traps only work how they work. The upper trap, which is a muscle that connects into the rear of the base of the skull, along the what's called cervical spine, which is just the section of your spine that we call the neck, and then down to the shoulder. That's where the upper trap works, okay? And that's going to be huge for this discussion. It connects behind the body, right? At the rear of the base of the skull and the spine as well. So they can't do anything other than pull the shoulders from where it connects at the shoulders straight up, okay? Behind the head. The shoulders naturally sit behind the body. I don't have some opinion on that. I couldn't. They only connect the way they connect. Muscles have insertions. Two ends normally is how it works. The reason I say normally is because in this case, it connects to the spine, the base of the skull, and the shoulder. But yes, they have to have two ends to anchor to contract, to shorten. That's what a muscle does, is it pulls two things together. Muscles don't push apart. They pull things together. That's why you have opposing muscles. Muscles like in the front of the body, you have hip flexors. In the rear of the body, you have hamstrings and glutes. Well, if we're going to put two together, you have in the front, the quads, which are like the front of your thighs, and your hip flexors, right? Which is where your hips will crease. If you're bending forward, where that hinge happens in the front, hip flexors, and then opposing, right, is the muscles I said in the rear. And we'll get into a little bit more anatomy in this episode. We will. But muscles have to have opposing muscles to them because they only pull together. Muscles don't push apart. So, yeah. Huge focus to just allow to work. One of the muscles that is the upper trap. I discussed where it works and what it does. It pulls the shoulders upward by shortening, okay, connecting from the end of the shoulder up here to the base of the skull in the very rear next to the spine, and even connects to the spine as well. That's something I want to hit so hard because of some descriptions of being able to see people who go to the gym and do workouts, or do workouts at home, or do workouts in any way, and the position their shoulders are in, and it's just so unnatural. I'm not condemning, nor will I be within anything that I ever say under In the Image Clothing Company, ever, regardless of how bold and like passionate I get, because I do. But it's not out of like I'm better than you or smarter than you. It's out of your body only works how it does, and I can say that because neither of us designed either of ours. So yes, I want to make that all very clear before I get into this because I'm going to get bold. Okay. All right, so just because of how the body works, clothing has to sit here. There's no opinion. You don't have to be in fashion. You don't have to want to look a certain way. Your skeletal system only connects the way that it does. And these angles and locations of having clothing sit and fit are just the only way that will allow the body to just do what it does without something pulling on it, restricting it, squeezing it, a knot, twisting it, a tag, altering its natural positions, all the things and any things that we get into. Shoelaces are massive. Drawstrings are huge. Tags are huge. Heels on shoes are huge. Unnatural materials are huge. The body will only work naturally if it can predict what it's touching. Stretchy materials are unnatural. They didn't even exist decades back and then ever before then. Tags in clothing didn't even exist decades back and then ever before then. So stretch within clothing just wasn't a thing. So 100% natural materials isn't only just the ideal in some perfect world, it's just the best for the body because the body is only natural. And again, until just decades ago, a decade is 10 years. And so multiple decades, within 100 years back, there was no such thing as these blends of materials, the way that we have nowadays, that are stretchy. There was no such thing as a lot of what we have nowadays, and I can get so into it, and I'm just going to pray through this episode. So what I say within this, as I said within the last episode 59 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, titled Running, there's so much more that I could have said within that episode of the discussion on running, but I didn't leave anything out, and it was okay to be what it was. Just know I could say more of just truth, just discussing it, just giving context and understandings of what's really happening. And within this episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 60, titled Workouts, the same applies. I could get so much deeper than I will get in this episode, but I'll get pretty deep with what I do say. Again, truth, not my opinion, not some ideal world, but just the only way the body works. There's no opinion to it. We can't change it, nor could any human being ever, from the beginning till the end. Adam to the last human, if there was or is, right? Truth, period, and done. Again, I'm not perfect, but I'm relaying truth. So here we go. Pants that we wear need to be entirely above our hips. So this is huge with the workout community, whatever it is. You know, you're doing a workout at home, you're doing a workout at gyms, X amount of times a week, maybe a couple times a month, maybe once a year, maybe never, but if you want to know, right? About workouts. It doesn't matter what end of anything you're on, just we're discussing it as it is. So the hips just have to be able to move. The femurs, which are the upper leg bones, come up and connect into the pelvis, which is the whole central hip unit, okay? That big bone, it's like kind of like a butterfly looking bone where our hips are. The spine comes down and connects to the hips. You've got so many muscles that go into the hips. And on the inside of your legs, you've got what's called adductors, muscles that pull the legs to the center of the body, which is where we need to get. Again, the body has a center line. And so anything out from there, farther than it would naturally be, you are just using excess muscle to try to stabilize and use the body because it stems in the center of itself. Again, no opinion. That's where the spine is, okay? So there's muscles on the inner part of the legs called adductors that pull the legs together, like if you were to hit your knees together, which don't, if you can help it, because that would, hurt. If you look at the outside of your legs, we have muscles called abductors that pull the legs apart, away from the center line of the body. Okay, very baseline, and there's so much that goes into it. Under the main site of In the Image Clothing Company, I made a video last fall in 2024 titled There is a Lot to Internal Rotation, but baseline, very, 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 very basic, and not every case does this apply, but baseline internal rotation is when the body rotates toward its center line. External rotation is when the body rotates away from its center line. And internal rotation is the goal. Getting to yourself. Again, not some belief, not some opinion, but there's a spine. You have to get to yourself or else you're using more effort. Imagine holding something right in front of you versus sticking your arms all the way out to your sides as far as you can and holding something in both hands. The amount of effort that it takes to hold something that far away from your center versus right in the very center of you is more. It takes more effort to hold it whatever it is, if it's an ounce or if it's 500 pounds or 7,000 kilograms, whatever you want to say, right? No matter what it is, it's harder to do. Even your own arm weight, which is your body itself, it's harder to hold your arms up without like just resting onto the floor because you've gotten fatigued. The farther out you get from your center, which is your spine, than it is at your center. Like your hands together like this, you can hold this for quite a long time. Stick your arms all the way out, it's going to be hard, okay? There's going to be a beautiful documentation. I'm so grateful for this episode. It's going to be amazing. It already is. I'm already so grateful for what it is up until this point. So internal rotation is what we focus on because it's coming to the center where the least amount of energy is going to be used for the body to just operate, which is what people are trying to intend on happening when they go do workouts, but it usually actually does the opposite. It damages the body in almost every case. I'm going to get into it. No opinion. We'll get into it. Now, you've got so much going into the hips is what I'm saying. There's, within the low back, the quadratus lumborum, muscles that go up from the hips up to the back. You've got the lats, the latissimus dorsi, however you want to pronounce it, a muscle that connects from the upper arm bone close to where the shoulder joint is, and it comes down and goes all the way from the rear of the body, connecting to the shoulders, down, connects to the base of the spine, some of those last vertebrae, and the top of the crest of the rear of the pelvis. So big muscles that come down from the shoulders to the pelvis and connect to the hips. The whole back they span. Then you've got all sorts of muscles going into the hips, and we could get into all the anatomy you want, but the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, okay, we talk about this stuff a lot and in depth. So in the front of the legs, you've got all your quads, right? The quad meaning four. There's all the quadriceps muscles, those thigh muscles that are connecting from down at the knee area, the knee joint, and coming up and connecting into the front of your hips. Well, and they go the ways they do. They come up through the pelvis and connect to the body, but just meaning into the whole hip area. You've got on the same, in the same area, hip flexors in the front of your legs, which are muscles that do, as they say, flex your hips upward, right? As if you're pulling your foot up. You're standing there and you're walking and like pulling your leg up, whether your knee's bent or it's straight, right? Muscles that are going into the hips in the front, flexing the hips. Or like doing a sit-up, right? And sitting up, or even just sitting up out of a bed. Those hip flexors really aid in pulling like the knees to the chest. That's a good way to say that. Now, in the rear, you've got hamstrings, big muscles that do the opposing location to the quadriceps, right? The quadriceps are on the front of the legs. The hamstrings are on the rear of the legs, both of those being just the upper leg, like the femur, that bone. Ow, gosh. That bone that comes up and connects into your hips. So those hamstrings pull your heels to your glutes, to your glutes, right? So your feet are going to come, like if you're sitting in a deep low squat, that's your hamstrings all the way contracted. If you're sitting, your glutes or your sit bones on your heels of your feet. That's your hamstrings, full range of motion contracted. Okay? So above your hamstrings, you've got your glutes. There's multiple glutes, and they do similar things to the hamstrings, and they work in conjunction with the hamstrings. Kind of like how the hip flexors do similar things to the quads and work in conjunction with the quadricep muscles. So there we go. That's some good basis of the legs coming into the hips, the back coming down into the hips. In the front of your body, we have our core. Very clear to hear and say, not in some ideal perfect world. Again, the human body only works how it works. If it were never to have been restricted, it would just do this. The core of our human flesh. Hear this correct and hear this so deeply for the rest of this entire episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 60, titled Workouts. And everything we ever discussed, this is the case of the human body from beginning to end, every human to ever live. The core of a human being should and always would be, unless or until altered, naturally activated. You hear people say, activate your core when you're ready to lift something. That is entirely a void statement if you're trying to just get the human being to do the only thing that it does. The core, the way that we think about it, all these abdominal muscles. You think about like a 6-pack or an 8-pack of muscles between like the lower part of the rib cage and the pelvis, right? The hips. We think about, like a man, usually we think about, just because men usually show and carry muscle in different ways than women, just because men and women really are different. Biologically, don't take my word for anything like that, or anything at all. Again, right? Don't believe me. I know that can be a debate, and especially at this time period, but there is only a man and only a woman. Biologically, that's how it is. We didn't decide it. I mean, we didn't decide that we were born this or that because we wanted it to be something like, you know what I mean, in the ways that just a human physical body is what it is. So, okay, that's very clear to hit as well. But yeah, it doesn't matter, man or woman, anyone could grow a 6-pack of muscles, just meaning like you have a very low amount of body fat, and the muscles that are just there can be seen through the skin, right? It's just muscles. It's just the human body. We don't got to get so nitpicky, because again, it's not about image. It's not about, there's no shaming if you don't look this way, but there's also no praise that should be there. Again, our God's words, don't believe me, but we're not here to lust after each other. And so people will focus on their bodies and try to sculpt them in a way that they want it to look. The body's just what it does. Again, it's just a mechanical machine. So, but the abdominal muscles and the core, what we think about the core being, anytime you hear that word, anytime you hear core exercises, sit-ups, crunches, leg lifts, those are some of the big ones for sure. Trying to get that core to be stronger than it just naturally is and is designed to work, that's not even something that can happen. Again, no opinion of mine. The core of the human being should always be activated, and always would if it wasn't altered, because it's the center of the body. From your center up and from your center down, that's like where the core is, in what we say is the core. And so it just would have to always be working, or else something else and many things within the whole entire being of a human has to do some sort of compensation, and it is. And that's a big, humongous factor into why people are in such physical pain nowadays in modern 2025. And going forward, again, things only getting more unnatural as they do and will. I'm not trying to prophesy out of me, but it's just how it is. And again, it has been prophesied out of Scripture. The world's only going to get worse, and that's supposed to happen, right? Leading up to the second coming of our living God. Don't believe me, but it is the truth. And you can look around and see it. It's not a belief. So the core of a human being, it would always be activated, or else something and many things are not. The body has to just only work as a whole. When the body breathes, every part of it is doing some sort of stabilization at least. Some things are literally moving, right? The scapulas, the big bones on the upper back, have to move up and out of the way to get room for the rib cage to actually expand. The ribs, the physical bones of our body, the ribs themselves actually expand and move. They have motion to them, not only the lungs within the rib cage. And so in order for that to happen, certain things like the collarbones elevation comes up, and the scapulas, as I just mentioned, there's a lot of things that really do physically move to allow breathing to happen, which is the basis of human life. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Oxygen, and I went into more than just the physical sense of what breathing is. I talked about oxygen in many ways and what we label as oxygen, but oxygen is the one thing that we can go the least amount of time without, okay? There's things like water. Well, really, again, hydration. It's not just water alone, because water can actually dehydrate you. And we've talked about that. You can check out the episode I referenced, and we'll probably get into some of that within this one. But there's certain things like that we think about in food, and keeping the body at a correct temperature. But breath is the foundation of human life. It goes back to, again, biblical, doctrinal truth of all things wording. Truthfully, really, actually, don't believe me, but our living God breathed breath into Adam's nostrils, and he created life that way, the first human being. There we go, right? Breath is the thing. The whole body is incorporated in some way, whether it's stabilizing or what, because even to the tips of our toes, the arches in our feet, similar to the core, just because the body only works as a whole, not in an ideal world, it's just the truth. That's how it actually is designed to work, and it would if it wasn't altered. The feet should always be activated, and so the feet are stabilizing the whole body through every breath it takes, and every part of the body. I just mentioned the feet because that's kind of like the farthest away thing from the ribs, as far as like if we're trying to get to the very extremity, the feet would be even farther than the tips of the fingers from where we're breathing at. But they really do things in every single breath. They stabilize. They really, truly do. So the core would never and should never, unless there's absolutely nothing you could do about it. And that is like the most rare extreme case. And I don't even know if it would be a case that could happen, unless you're just entirely paralyzed. Okay, sure. The whole body has to have the core doing its thing. I reference apples. You think about an apple is only what it is because of the core, where the seeds are. The apple was once only a seed that stemmed at the core of it. If the apple had no core, if you go up to an apple on a tree and it's growing and you cored the apple and took the whole core out of it, as if like the human body had a deactivated core, which is a state that a lot of people are in, but doesn't happen actually. I mean, it's crazy that can happen. Myself in the past, and I was doing that for years. My core was deactivated through most all of my life, actually, truly, up until recent. But you core an apple, and now the apple's not there. I mean, the apple's like withering away. It will just rot because it's not being fed, supported, and given life through its core. That's how the human being works. The only way that it does. No opinion of mine, and we can't change it. So that's why when I say it, we have to be so intentional, and only more so going forward, just because the way the man-made world is. No opinion of mine. We have to be extremely intentional to be able to keep our cores activated, because we're on man-made flat flooring and weird heights of chairs that are just deactivating parts of our bodies. And then they're suffering physically, truly, immensely in many cases. The majority of cases, actually, nowadays. So the core just has to always be activated. And it's not something that's crazy hard to get to. There's no workouts to do to get it there. The key word of In The Image Clothing Company is allow, okay? We allow the body to do what it's designed to. So me personally, being the founder, I don't do workouts. I have in the past, and I've got a lot of context and personal experience, and I understand workout communities, quote unquote, and what it means to quote unquote workout. I do actually very, very deeply, more thoroughly than a lot of people who do go do workouts often, because at the time I was like into it, right? But truthfully, the way the human body works, like I referenced that episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, designed to work. The body's designed to just always be in a state of constant activation through the whole thing, like an animal is. Human bodies are no different in the physical function sense than animals. I mean, most any like mammal you think of, it's got a heart, it's got lungs, it's got legs and arms that operate in the ways that they do, even if it has 4 legs rather than 2 of each. It's still so extremely similar to just the way that the human flesh, physically a mechanical machine that we are, operates. And an animal has to have the entirety of it just activated as a whole, and it does because there's nothing restricting it. But human beings are different because we wear clothing. And so anything you place onto a fleshly mechanical machine that's not the way that it works is going to alter it in those ways that it's not shaped and fitting the way that the body works. And that's just how it is, period, and done. No opinion. That's it. So with all that being said, I'm going to get to now where clothing has to sit. The reason I went into quite a bit of discussion of the anatomy of the hips is because we can't have pants on the hips. The waistline, it has to be all the way up above the hip bones, which is just the crest of the pelvis. The pelvis, like I said, is shaped similar to a butterfly in a sense, like wings of a butterfly is how, people talk about it like that. And because that's what it looks like, really, just the whole bone and structure of the pelvis as it is, right? Everything that goes into it being what it is. The base of the spine and the top of the legs, right? This whole structure. So the top of the hip bones, they're actually part of like a whole big bone. It's not just like there's like the end of a bone that sticks there. If you don't know what like the hip structure looks like, it actually is it's a whole crest like this, right? If you're watching in visual, if you're listening, you can still get what I'm saying from everything in this. Don't feel like you have to be seeing this to get something from it. You don't at all. You can get the fullness of this besides just what you can't see me visually describing if you are only listening to it. It'll be just as beneficial to you except for in the ways that you can't see what I'm showing, because I do show some things here. But the top of the pelvis determines the angle of where it's going to be. You hear the term anterior pelvic tilt a lot nowadays, and that is false. There's no such thing as an anterior pelvic tilt unless there's just something that's pulling your pelvis into a position that really what it is it seems anterior, but it's actually a twist, and it's actually stemming from the feet or maybe even from the tops of the shoulders. And I'll get into that. But again, if something in the body is altered in any way, something else and many things have to compensate. So usually when you're having a problem within your physical mechanical machine, it's a different part of it that's altered than where the symptom of the pain is. Like you can have symptoms in like your mid back, which is very common, but it's actually coming from the feet in almost every case. And I'll get into it. No opinion, but it's just the truth. And people will tell you that as well. People who really know the body and are actually good and knowledgeable and very understanding of the human body in physical therapy realms and massage therapists and certain places. I don't want to try to, say that those people know what they're talking about, because a lot of times they don't. And a lot of times it's not their fault, but they've just read literature and, books of somebody else has written to tell them how the body works. But within In The Image Clothing Company, it's all personal experience. It's all stuff that you can do and know and understand yourself because you have a body. Don't let somebody else tell you how your body works if they're wrong, right? That's why I say don't believe me, don't believe anybody. Don't believe the doctors just because they've got a 35-year degree certificate from a college, right? I just want to make it absurd because anybody can learn anything they want, but that doesn't mean it's the truth. Anybody can write a book and have you read it and say, hey, learn this. Learn what? The words you made up? In any case, it could be, what I'm saying. So we look at things as they are. That's what I'm saying. We have a physical body ourselves. Truth manifests itself to you. Don't believe what somebody else says to you if it doesn't work. Now you're just believing something that's false. Don't believe anything, and don't let me tell you what to do, but that's what I mean. Truth is truth. So the body only works how it does. You can find out how your own body works, but we give a lot of we give basically everything you need to know about the physical function of the body and just how to allow it to do what it's going to. We really do. That's a bold thing to say, but that really is the case. Under In The Image Clothing Company, that's what we do here. So, yeah, that's beautiful to be able to say confidently because, yeah, that's what we do. That's the goal, is to give every bit of context and understanding that you would need to just allow, keyword, your body to work. And we do. We really, up until this point, I've said, confidently I can say everything that you'd need to know to be able to have an understanding of your own body to where you do understand it. So that's great because we'll just, further what we say and just get deeper with what we do say. And so up until this point, we really have said everything you would need to know. That's insane because I can say that confidently, very certainly. Yes, that's amazing. With the accumulation of like the main side of In The Image Clothing Company and what I've referenced and talked about and discussed within the podcast, In The Image Clothing Company podcast. So we talk about a lot on the In The Image Clothing Company music side of things as well. So that's just wonderful. That's the whole point. Don't believe me, and it's not about me at all. But we're just, because that's the whole thing is I could go the rest of my life knowing what I currently learn or currently know, and then I will just continue to learn more as and when I do, if even, right? Because if I die after this or even before this episode of In The Image Clothing Company podcast wraps up, then I won't learn more in this physical life. So, right, I could go the rest of my life just knowing these things, but the only reason we have this company is to share truth. And so don't believe us. But let's give some context, let's give some truth, and there you go. It'll manifest itself to you. Now, yeah, so with all that, oh, goodness gracious, where was I? I was talking about the hips. Yeah, the hip structure. Oh, goodness. It just is what it is. But the point is, when we put pants above our hips, it's not like we're just setting them above like the end of a bone. The hips as a whole have both anterior motion and posterior motion, which is the opposite. Your hips kind of like tipping forward, if you will, as if like you're tipping a bucket forward to pour it out. That's anterior tilt rotation of the pelvis. And if you're like scooping a bucket up like this toward you to get water. I've never said it like that, but that's a great way to see it. That's posterior, like turning your hands upward towards yourself. Well, even like drinking a glass up toward yourself, or drinking out of anything, and pouring water. That rotation, that angle, that direction is posterior of the pelvis. So I've said before, and really it sounds like a blanket statement, but it is the truth. If you could boil down two things that we do within In The Image Clothing Company for the human body and just label two things only, and there you go, like I just said, having enough context, for example, like a way of explaining it, just to know how your own body works or how to get to where you need to be, we say two things. We really can. Because from there, everything else has to do what it has to do to allow these two things to happen. A posterior tuck of the pelvis, right? As if, again, like you're drinking water out of a cup or anything that's going to hydrate you, right? Not just plain water, but times and places. But yeah, right? Tilting the pelvis like underneath yourself. Posterior tuck of the pelvis, that's one. And the second one is internal rotation at like the hip socket, that then travels down to the toes, and at the shoulder joint, that then travels down to the ends of the fingertips. And anything and everything that's in the body that goes into internal rotation, those are the two things. Posterior tuck of the pelvis and internal rotation. If you boil down what we share and show to, not because we say to do something to get anything to happen, because we cannot, as a human being, get our bodies to do anything, but just to allow the body to be in its neutral, which again is a synonym to natural, which is meaning just the only way the human body works, position. Those are the two things that you have to do, because everything else will just follow at that point, because you're coming to the center line of your being, and the posterior tuck, there's no internal rotation that actually happens without the pelvis tucking posteriorly to where it's neutral. The pelvis goes anterior and your body goes external, away from its own center line. Everything's harder, as I discussed, about holding something with your hands like in front of you versus out to the sides as far as you could go. The farther external you get, external, again, not in every sense of everything, but most always within the human body, external rotation just means away from your own center line. And so everything's harder the farther away you get from your own body. Okay, that's huge context for this discussion. That's just the truth. That's how it is. That's how the body works. So internal rotation is what we focus on. And in order for that to happen, like I just said, the pelvis has to be posteriorly tucked to the degree that then the spine can be neutral. Because if the pelvis goes anterior, the spine, the lower part of the back, the lumbar spine, will curve. People call it a sway back. Really just means your pelvis is in an unnatural position. And again, it usually stems at the feet. We'll get into it. But everything has to compensate. The body's still just what it is. It still has to try to, in those cases, being altered, work as a whole, but it can't if it is altered. So, right, because if your pelvis goes anterior, your core has deactivated. So furthering what I'm saying about where pants need to sit, pants need to be all the way up above the hips so that it's not restricting their natural motion at all. But then it also needs to be, again, this is not just for any specific if blank. This is in every case, in every sense of what a human being, being a mechanical, structural, operating machine is. The waistband of our bodies, every one of us to ever live, it just is how it is. It's not my opinion. The waistband has to be very slightly higher in the front than it is in the rear of the pants. Because the only way muscles work, as I discussed at the beginning, the only way that muscles work is if they shorten. Muscles don't push. We can push things. That's an operation the body does have. It's not how it naturally works. The body is designed to pull, not push. We'll get into this further, but on the main side of In The Image Clothing Company, I made a video under the Truth Behind series that we do have titled The Truth Behind Push versus Pull. And I discussed and showed, not my opinion, but it's the truth, the human body is designed to pull. There's just so much more mechanical advantage to pulling. Pulling gets us closer to where the body naturally would be neutral. The shoulders pulling go behind the body where they naturally sit. As I said, the upper trap connects behind the rear of the base of the skull, and those upper traps are the highest muscle that actually support our shoulders from not just falling to the earth. So I'm getting kind of hard hitting and bold because it dumbfounds me, but it's things I didn't know in the past either. but just I have to say it as bold as it is because people have their opinions and beliefs and they've been told things and taught things falsely. I'm not going to say everything perfect. I will not, nor ever could I. But I'm discussing truth. Don't believe me, but again, it manifests itself to you. Just take what I'm saying in this, not just because I am, but the truth within this. Dissect that, please. Don't care about what I'm saying, Evan Strong. Do not. But it's the truth within it. So, which is ideally the whole thing that I'm saying within this entire episode and everything we talk about within In the Image Clothing Company. That's the ideal. So, and that's what I'm trying to do. So, the core muscles, right? Those abdominal muscles, like I mentioned, a six-pack. Those muscles can only do what they do. The only thing they do if they get shorter. You aren't going to use your abdominal muscles to put your pelvis anterior, to put a sway in your low back. It's not going to happen because the insertion of those muscles and them shortening, right, the two ends where they connect, pulling those two ends together will posteriorly tuck the pelvis and get that spine neutral. So that's the only way you're ever going to allow your core to be activated. Because look at this. The circumference of the waist is what a waistband of pants are. Okay, like they're just going all the way around your waist and right all the way above the hips. So they're not altering them. If that falls at all farther down in the front, and the only way that those core muscles can activate and really stay activated, because they always naturally would, is if they get shorter, but the waistband is then pulling them longer. If it's any to a millimeter or smaller, any lower in the front, it's physically just pulling, elongating, stretching, lengthening your core muscles that can only even do anything that a muscle does if they contract and get shorter. So the pants have to, period and done. No opinion, no fashion. They have to sit, and it has to only be very, very slightly, but it does have to be higher in the front. Because the thing is, if they're entirely level front to rear, then they can fall in the front and you're pulling on your core. But if it always stays even just, like I said, with the end we don't want, right, in a good way, even if they're only a millimeter higher in the front, they're still higher. And we just live on an earth with gravity, so it's, one end is lower and one end is higher. We want the front always to be higher of the waistband of any pant, whatever you could label as that we place on us. That's the waistband of a dress. That's the waistband of anything you're going to go to the gym in, anything you're going to a business meeting in, anything you're going to the beach in, anything you're going to do anything as a human being in. If it's placed on you and it's like pant type thing, it has to be above the hips and slightly higher in the front for the mechanics of the human body. Don't believe me. It's just how it works. Okay, so there's pants. Now, where they need to sit. Now, tops that we wear. If it's a shirt, a jacket, a coat, anything, again, a tank top, whatever it is. It could be anything, a tunic, a shawl. You can label anything that you could call a top that goes on your torso. The seams on top, because of, as I said, the location of the two insertions of the ends of the upper traps, the highest muscle that supports the shoulders, and tops sit on the shoulders. Pants sit on the hips, okay? The shoulders sit behind the body. There's no opinion to it. There's no any kind of thing that could happen. The only thing that's supporting your I'm not going to say the only thing because there's many things that go into the shoulders, but the highest muscle that's actually really doing a lot of work. I mean, there's neck muscles that really do play into supporting the shoulders and elevating the rib cage and some of those upper ribs yes, I get that. But I get that yes. I get it. But here's the thing. The upper traps, they connect into the very, 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 very back of your skull because they also connect to your spine, which is the very farthest back of you in the center. And then they come down and connect to the shoulders, okay? And they're supporting the shoulders vertically. So when you're going to elevate your shoulders, they're behind your head. There's no opinion. There is no possible opinion. There's no possible posture debate. There's no possible genetic, well, he has this and she has that. No. The human body's upper trapezius muscles connect into the rear and very, very rear of the base of the skull and to the spine. So the shoulders sit behind the body. Hear that and hear that and hear that. Don't believe me. That's how the body works. I didn't design it. I can't decide it. They connect behind. The shoulders sit behind the body. The reason I'm hitting that so hard, like I'm sledgehammering this thing into the ground like a metal stake of a railroad track, is because you'll see gym goers, workout people, and their shoulders will be so far in front of their bodies. People are working their pectoral muscles, the muscles that are on the front of the chest, so much, doing pushing motions. As I said, the body is designed to pull. No opinion of mine. Mechanically, the shoulders sit behind the body. You cannot change it. I cannot change it. No human being can decide it. That's how the shoulders connect to the body. Behind the head. No opinion. I'm going to hit that massively hard because there's all this workout thing. Again, if I sound like I'm being accusations or mean, or if I'm offending you, well, if I'm offending you, that's on you. But I'm, on my end, not trying to talk down on anybody, shame anybody, nothing, in any way, shape, or form. But I'm going to speak the truth as hard as it is because I cannot change it. I did not decide it. It is what it is. This will only help you as far as what I'm saying that is actually true. And ideally everything. I'm trying my best, right? I'm going to mess up, and I will, but I'm trying my best. So it's so common to have people push. Bench presses are huge. Push-ups are huge. You're taking your shoulders and putting them in a position they don't even connect. The shoulders connect behind the body. Not only are there upper traps that connect into the very, very, very back of the base of the skull and the spine, which is behind you, and then they connect to the shoulders. There's mid traps, which are below those upper traps, that connect from, the shoulders to the spine. They pull the shoulders to the back of the body and to the center of the rear of the body, to the spine, in the back of the body. Then you also have lower traps. There's 3 trapezius sections. The lower traps as well connect from the shoulders to the rear of the body. The spine in the center of the back. Okay. Even the lats, and lats do quite a different function than the traps. They really do. The lats don't do what a lot of people in workout communities think that they do. And that's a big reason why people have so much shoulder damage, is because they're overworking their traps. The pectorals, as I said, are also being very overworked. The upper traps are just being worked in a position they never could even do a function in, because they only insert in the locations they do, which is entirely behind the body, as far as you can get, because it's the center of the rear on the spine. I want to hit that into the ground. There's no opinion to it, and not everybody, but so many people go to the gym, or again, wherever you're going. You don't have to go to a gym. You can do it in your house, you can do it outside, you can do whatever, but they're pushing. And stop it. Don't let me tell you what to do, but your body does not push in the way that people are pushing. Again, the body can push. The pectorals shorten in the front and allow pushing to happen. But again, you've got all those muscles, plus you've got rhomboids, you've got the rotator cuff, you've got, just every muscle that's in the rear of the body, and I just mentioned quite a many that pull. And then in the front, what? You got the pecs. If I'm missing a muscle or two or what, the deltoids, like the front delts and things, right? But like what, 2, 3 muscles, even if there's quite a bit more than that I'm not saying or thinking about right now or don't even know about right now, just the amount of muscles and the functionality and the sheer size and range of motion in a pull versus a push, the body's designed to pull. And just the insertions, the way that it works, the shoulders only work where they're designed to sit, which is entirely behind the body, because of the insertions of where the muscles are. We don't get to decide it. You don't get to decide, well, sure, but I want to train my body like X, Y, Z, or Q. You don't get to decide how to train your body. We can only understand how our bodies were designed and let them do their thing. There's no opinion to that. But we're so far off as a society. So the shoulders sit behind the body, and they just do. There's no way they couldn't without pain. And so people are having pain. Oh my gosh. All right, so because of where shoulders naturally sit behind the body, well, the scapulas, those big bones that are on the top of the upper back, they sit behind the back. They should be pretty well close to the spine and the rear. That's just how they work. neutrally, if your arms are going to hang down to your sides with your arms straight, your upper traps actually activated to where your elbows can extend straight and just rest, to where your thumbs can point forward and your hands can be pretty well closed in their neutral, relaxed position. That neutral wrist, which is straight out from the outer forearm, out the pinky, as if you're laying your arm flat down on something, that all can only happen if your shoulders are behind your body. That open palm that I'm talking about all the time within In The Image Clothing Company that correlates directly with the arches that are naturally activated always as the core, right? Well, as the whole body, but I just want to focus on those two things that are very commonly misunderstood. The palm's openness, as if you can fit a little ball in the palm of your hand, and the rounding that is there to the hand, that can only happen if there's natural support to the fingertips from the fingernails. That's their point. That's the point of fingernails, is supporting the fingertips. Entirely to the very end of the fingertip is where the nails have to be. It's not an opinion. That's what they're for, is to support it. Your whole body's being damaged if the tips of your fingers are not being supported naturally by the nail. So we need to cut our fingernails flat at the very, very tip of our finger. If it's any shorter than the end, if the fingertip rolls over the end of the fingernail at all, you have just lost like such a high degree of just natural strength, and you've altered the position of your shoulders. They'll come forward, and your arches in your feet will collapse. Your hands will work out of their only neutral position rather than being neutral, straight out from the pinky when we follow that outer forearm, as if you're just laying your arm down and stick your pinky out, as if you're doing the shaka like the Hawaiians here in the United States of America, right? Golly, the body just works how it works. I'm not condemning. I didn't know any of this, right? So anytime I'm like so like dumbfounded, it's not like you should know. I didn't either. But it's just, I don't use the word sad. I was going to use the word sad, but I'm not sad about it. It's unfortunate because we have just only one human fleshly being in this whole life. And that's what this life is. You don't have a physical earthly life if you don't have a physical body. So, and it only does what it does. So that's why I get so like, man, it's crazy type of things. You know, I say those type of words and stuff. I'm not condemning others. I'm not talking down on anybody for not knowing. You don't know what you don't know. And that's fine. But that's why I'm saying this. I just might say it with like, what you might hear as me being mean is me just, it's my passion, right? I mean, this is my company. Not that it's about me, but it is my company in the sense of I'm the founder. And we're speaking and spreading and sharing truth for the entire earth. Anybody that could ever hear these things. And these things won't ever change from the beginning to the end. Like I said, it's just what it is. I didn't design it. I didn't decide it. So, the human body. Here we go. The fingernails have to be supporting the fingertips. You can go to the gym 3 times a week for 2 hours each time for the rest of your life and be working out hard and pushing your body, sweating and, you know, doing all this stuff and whatever. And somebody else could come along and be naturally so much stronger than you without trying to get their body to be, but they just have natural support. And let's say you're cutting your fingernails too short. That's what they're for. They have to support the fingers. So that goes with toenails as well. And a lot of it's hygiene. A lot of it, people try to be, you know, and again, you don't know what you don't know, but a lot of people think that, well, it'll look cleaner and it'll be easier, because it is easier to keep your nails cleaner the shorter they are. But your whole entire body's struggling. So you can have the tips of your fingernails looking and seeming cleaner and actually being free of debris easier. Sure, that is the case, most always, in just about every single case. But the rest of your whole entire body, the entirety of it, is being altered if your fingernails are cut shorter than the very tips of your fingers. That's just how it is. It's not my opinion. That's just how the body is designed to be. So that's one of the biggest things within workout communities. Because tonight, when I told you I went and played volleyball, where I was at, they actually had a little rock wall as well, like a little bouldering type thing. It's probably about 10 feet. It didn't go very tall because you're not harnessed in, and there wasn't even that much of a mat. It was just kind of like a softer floor. So it was tall enough to where like that's safe enough for them to do, right? For a public place of allowing you to climb. And this one guy that that was there when I showed up, we were just kind of messing around on it because it's just one of the things that I did there. I played volleyball for the most part of the time there. he was climbing the wall, and I just saw his hands shaking and shaking and shaking. And again, no condemnation about like, wow, he's weak, but he didn't have fingernails. And so his hand has no support. All the musculature and tendons in the hand that are just allowing the skeletal system of what the hand is to do its operation are designed to do all they do with support from something that the body's also been given in addition to the muscles and tendons and things in the hand, which is the fingernails. So that's one of those things that people just don't know about, and they do it for a reason that seems good, right? And again, hygiene. They'll cut their nails too short. I get that. I do, very much so. I get it. Yeah, but they have to be clear to the very tips of the fingers, just so that the tip can't roll over it. Otherwise, it's just slipping away and something else is compensating. So your shoulder's natural only working position gets changed. And then if your shoulders are altered, your entire body's altered. Well, I mean, if your fingertips are altered, your entire body's altered. But then, yeah, I mean, then it travels directly, just through the chain of the arm. The wrist angle will never be able to be neutral if there's no support from the fingers. They'll kind of fall into this position and your hands will kind of be down, and then now your hands are altered. And I always say the hand is essentially the shoulder because it is. The foot is essentially the hips because they are. That's how the body works. I mean, imagine doing push-ups with no hands. Your shoulders would have to be doing a lot more stabilization because the hand isn't there to do all that it's going to do. Imagine how the hips are going to work if you didn't have feet because you just had like your feet amputated for whatever reason, let's say, or just you weren't born with feet. I mean, things happen. And you're just walking around on the sticks that are the lower leg. Your hips are going to be so altered. So the feet really are essentially the hips, and the hands really are essentially the shoulders. That's just how it is. And so because of that, everything that I've said within the fingertips and the fingernails applies exactly and directly the exact same to the feet and the toes and the toe nails. But the thing is, we need to cut the tips of them flat. And then you can curve the edges so they're not just sharp. But if you round, I understand the tips of the fingers are round, but if you cut the tips of your fingernails flat, then when you grab something, your fingers can't roll. And so that's entirely going to diminish your natural grip strength if your nails are cut round. If you cut them flat, well, and you can look at mine. Mine right now aren't cut so meticulously, but you can see like the tips are pretty well flat, but then the corners have some rounding to them. I'm also a fingerstyle guitarist, and so I do use my fingernails to pick the strings. But I'd have them at the same length regardless, because that's the thing is we don't want to have, I don't want to get off topic, but again, the body only does what it does in every aspect of anything that it ever does. We don't want to ever cater a certain item of clothing, a certain functionality of any part of the body to a certain activity, because the body's always just what it is, and it just goes through the earth doing what it does. And it always has to be just in the only state that it is, because it only has one actual working position of everything that it does. So, yes, flat on the tips, because then you grab something and your fingernails can't, or your fingers all the way traveling again through your whole body from the very tips of your fingers, the functionality does. They can't roll side to side if it's cut flat. They'll have this natural, like, sturdiness to them. So, yeah, I was over there climbing, and I could just have so much grip, so much easier, because I don't train my grip. And some people do. But even the people that do, I potentially could have stronger grip, naturally, than somebody else who's training theirs. If they have too short of nails, and I just have properly cut nails to the very tips of my fingers to support them naturally. It's just how it is. And it's like I say, I mean, it's like with clothing. You don't have to like fashion to know that your clothing is going to alter your body if you're not doing everything you can to allow it to just allow your body to work. You don't have to have any kind of opinion, and there's no opinion to be had. That's what fingernails are for. So I don't care what you think you want to do, or what you think looks best, or what your lifestyle choices are, and it's easier for you to do X, Y, and W if you don't have fingernails. And so you cut them as short as you can for those reasons. Your entire body's suffering physically, literally. The entirety of it has changed, the operation, every part of it. Your pelvis's position has changed. Your shoulder's position has definitely changed. Just, I mean, that's closer to your fingertips than your pelvis, right? But the arches in your feet are collapsed if you don't have fingernails. That's just how it is. The body's just designed to work. If something in it isn't working correct at all in any kind of form, even if it's to a small degree, if there's anything you can do about it, right, then something else and many things are compensating. Even if there's nothing you can do about it, it's still happening. But I just mean, don't get down on yourself. I mean, do all you can do if you've done all you can, and there's still parts of your body that, we've got situations that are unique, and that's what it is. You've got an amputation. You're not going to be worrying about the toenails on your right foot if you don't have a foot there because it's been amputated, right? But in everything we can do, we have to, if we want to be allowing the body to do the only thing that it does. So that's a huge thing within workout communities, is just nails. You don't have fingernails, you can go do all the workouts you want. You're not only not going to have the amount of natural workings in any way, shape, or form that your body just does have if it's not altered, because cutting your fingernails too short is altering your body, truly. Not only that, but you're now deeply ingraining an incorrect position of many parts of your body, really the whole thing. If you're doing workouts in whatever way, shape, or form that looks with too short of fingernails because you've cut them too short, you're deeply ingraining patternings, scar tissue of parts of the body where muscles are trying to adhere to bones to just try to work because they're being pulled out of their only neutral position, because stemming at the hands, which are the things that you're using to grab the weights or to grab the bar to do a pull-up or to put on the ground to do a push-up to support your body, the fingernails. That's one of the biggest things within the human body, actually. You can have your clothing fitting entirely correct and shoes laced and tied correct, drawstrings tied evenly to where your hips aren't being twisted. You can be in 100% natural materials. Every ounce of anything that we talk about here, just because it's the truth of how to allow, keyword, the human body to work. But if you don't have fingernails and or toenails, your body won't work correct because it's designed to work the way that it is. And the fingernails are there to support the hands. The toenails are there to support the feet. That's just how it happens. So, yeah, that's just it, okay? So the arches in the feet will never be there, and the body can't even work without feet arches. You can be trying to slump your human flesh through your earthly existence, but the body cannot work without fingernails that are, as I described with the fingernails. Toenails have to be entirely to the tips of the toes, so the end of the toe cannot roll over the nail, and cut flat so that your toes aren't rolling around on a rounded toenail. And then, you can round the corners of them, but the tips need to be flat, right? As I showed with my fingernails here. If you can't see it, it doesn't matter. I've discussed it and described it in a way where you understand what I'm saying. At least you have every ability to, from what I have said on my end. So, great. Really great. I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. It's just that it's so hard-hitting to me. I mean, the body only does what it does. It's crazy. Well, I say all the time, it's crazy that we're allowed to do things wrong. I mean, our God designed us, and he could have structured this whole existence any way that he wanted, but that's the whole point, is we're supposed to be in a place where we can get lost and misunderstood and misunderstanding of things, so that we have to rely on him because he knows everything. Truly, he does. Don't believe me, but he does. That's the truth. So, okay, I'm gonna go back to tops. This is all talking about workouts. This really truly is. This is just how we're gonna allow the body to do the only thing that it will ever do. We did not design it. We cannot decide how it works. It only does what it does. I've said all these things since the very founding of In the Image Clothing Company. That's why I founded In the Image Clothing Company. So the tops that we wear, as I was saying, the reason I got into fingernails is because the shoulders naturally sit behind the body, but if your fingers aren't supported by nails because you have cut them too short, don't get after yourself, but just stop cutting them too short. And I know there's reasons to go into it, right? Patternings that we get into emotionally that cause us to bite our nails or pick them or cut them. I get it, but they have to be there. Again, no matter what your current state is emotionally or your belief about hygiene or whatever, there's no way you can have any kind of opinion, belief, trauma, habit, patterning that overdoes or like trumps the truth that the only way the body works is if it's supported in the ways that it's designed to be. Okay? So we gotta do all that we can to like work through the emotional stuff that comes down to picking the nails, biting the nails. We gotta get over ourselves and our parents or our significant other, if it is, or whatever, that tells us that our fingernails should be cut short to look this way or to stay clean or whatever. No, don't believe it. Again, truth manifests itself to you. You start to have your nails the way that I'm discussing, not because of me, because it's the truth. Your entire life will change. If that's the only thing that you do within what we discuss through In The Image Clothing Company, that will change your entire life. I'm not making it something it isn't. That is the truth. It changed mine. That thing alone. Truly. I used to cut my fingernails way too short because I mean, I didn't have like a specific length I'd do, but I'd just be like, oh, they seem to be kind of getting in the way is what I thought. And so I'd cut them off short. But then I can think back now to how my whole life was. My emotional state was off the rails because there was, you feel like you don't have a physical grasp on anything because you don't. But then also physically, yeah, you're just using so much energy through your whole body than it would ever have to do naturally, the way this designed to be. And not only that, but like I'm saying, things are just working out of their only working position, as in not in their only working position. So the whole body's in pain, the whole body, because of fingernails and or toenails. That is the truth. So like posture, you will never have quote unquote posture, which is all that means is, again, if the body was never altered by anything, how would it just work the most efficiently? It would stand very vertical with a slight curve in the spine just to keep everything mobile. Oh, this device that I'm filming this with popped up with something. I just was making sure it didn't like cut. It just told me that 20% battery is remaining. That's fine. But posture is a myth. All posture in the human body means is the most efficient way that the body can stand vertically on the earth with gravity pulling straight down on it. If there's a rod going through the human being that's representing how posture is going to, or well, yeah, how posture is going to be, quote unquote, but how gravity is going to pull on it, every muscle within the body always would naturally just be activated to work as a whole. So there needs to be a slight bend in everything to allow activation, because you have to just be slightly into a range of motion for it to work in every single muscle and joint of the body. So there's a very slight bend in everything, but it's pretty darn vertical. And that's just what quote unquote posture is. It's actually a myth of like trying to have posture. It's just how the body would stand because it's how it's designed to stand. That's it. So that's it. It's clothing, period, and done. The truth, not my opinion, not because I have some company that has clothing in the name. It's just the truth. The way the human body gets altered is because of the only thing that's placed physically on the physical mechanical machine that is our human body, and that's clothing. It is the truth. It is the reason. Really. I mean, anything that could play into altering the body can play into altering the body, but nothing does it to the degree that clothing does. It is the actual cause of your physical pain. Aside from injuries and deformities and physical ailments and ways, infections, whatever. But as far as pain and things that you just are noticing keep coming back and keeps continuing to persist to be what it is, but you can't seem to figure out why, don't believe me, but the truth is, it is your clothing. Also, things like fingernails, but we just discussed the truth, man. It really is what it is. As in, again, we're never going to say anything perfect here at In The Image Clothing Company because we're all sinful by nature human beings, but we really discuss the truth. You never have to work out a human being. It's designed to do what it's designed to do. But if there's ever a time when any part of it's deactivated, it's altered. We just need to keep the body working as a whole by just not restricting the way it's designed to be, which is working as a whole, without having to try to. Animals don't do workouts. They just do what they have to do. They just function. Human beings would, unless clothing was placed on them. It is the truth. So don't believe me, but it is what it is. It's just the truth. In The Image Clothing Company, we speak universal, eternal, unchanging truths. We tell you the actual fix to your body's physical persistent pain that you just don't really understand why. That isn't from something like an injury. We give the actual truth, and it will always be thousands and thousands of years in the future. This will always apply to every single human being to ever live. The things that we discuss, it will. Don't believe us. So, it's just the truth. Now, we're talking about where clothing needs to sit. We covered pants, shirts. The top seams need to sit behind these little bones. If you feel the top of your shoulder, like close to the edge of your shoulder, there's a little bone up there. If you've got some fat content between the bone and the skin, cool, right? I don't care. I'm not shaming you if you do. If anybody does, that's on them. Don't care, please, because you don't need to. But there's a bone up there that's close to the edge of your shoulder. And if you follow that closer to the center of your chest, right, the sternum, which is that big bone where the ribs come and connect in the front, exactly opposite to where the spine is. On the rear, the sternum is on the front. Mine has been cut in half entirely 2 times, 2 full open heart surgeries. So I've got some experience with what the sternum of the body is. I'm fine, if you're wondering. Now, I've gone through some surgeries. I was fine then, too. I mean, I know Christ, and I know the truth of all things, the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I'm fine. Even if I die, I'm fine. For real. If you follow that bone and it comes to the center here, at the lower part of your neck, where like the front of the tube of your neck comes down, where the Adam's apple is, if you think about it like that, it's called a trachea, this tube. Where these 2 bones are up here at the base of your neck, that's one end of your collarbone. And then again, you follow it from there out to the edge of your shoulder, that's the other end of your collarbone. And so those bones follow where your shoulder goes. And they rotate from, like how I say muscles have insertions and 2 ends of them, bones have, well, just 2 ends of them. And one end is up here on the top of the shoulder of that collarbone. The other end is right here in the front of the body, right next to the sternum in the center. So those bones, where that bump is on the top of the shoulder, that end of the collarbone, that needs to be in front of the shoulder seam. So the clothing we wear sits behind those little bones up there. The seams on top of our shoulder sit behind those little bones on the top of the shoulder, the other end of the collarbone from the sternum, right? Follow the sternum out, bones on top of the shoulders, the clothing sits behind them. Because if the shoulders, which they do, no dispute, is just the anatomy of the human body the way that it is, I don't get to decide, the shoulders naturally sit behind the body. So having those seams sit behind those little bones will then allow the shoulders to kind of find those seams, because that bone's the crest of the shoulder, the peak of the shoulder, the topmost part of the shoulder. And so where that's going to rest is going to be where the seam is of the clothing. That's just how the body works subconsciously. It's just going to kind of like find seams, quote unquote. But also, again, the shirt's just something placed physically on our bodies. It's just a weight that we're holding up all day. That's all a shirt is to the body, really. And so if the weight of that's coming down, we want it to be pulling down in the ways that it's going to, just meaning the weight of the actual material that is the shirt or any top that we wear. We want that to be pulling downward in the location we want our shoulders to be sitting in, because of the only position they actually connect into, because of where the insertions of both ends of the muscles are that allows that to happen, that then allows the joints of the skeletal system, which is what we focus on, but just describing the muscles because the muscles move that skeletal system, right? Behind the body. So the seam's behind the shoulders, so the shoulders will just follow and stay behind the body. Okay, and then for the edges of our shoulder seams, it's so common to wear oversized clothing, and I get why to degrees. I mean, I get why to, actually, I really get why. I understand why, but it's more than most people think, but I do get that fashion goes into it as well. Also, though, anything placed inside your clothing that your body doesn't want to touch, like tags, and anything that's uneven, if anything's uneven within clothing, you kind of feel like you want to get it like away from you, and you want more motion. Because if something's fitting well as far as the size, but it's imbalanced, it's going to feel like you're being like restricted. but things should fit well, but be centered because the body's centered. And we have a title of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. One of the episodes is titled Staying Centered, and I went into that. So I get a lot of reasons as to why people wear oversized clothing. It's not only just something they want to do out of fashion, but there's a lot of reasons that go into it that I really do get. And I'm not going to get so much into that within this, but I've talked about that when and where and as I have on the main side of In the Image Clothing Company. I made a video last fall in 2024 titled Why Oversized Clothing is Common. And that's, what I discussed in there. But the shoulders just move how they do. The shoulder's a ball and socket joint. So the upper arm bone comes into the shoulder capsule and it just rotates and it does all the things that it does. There's a lot of motion in the arms. And the seams just have to be right where that's going to happen. So if you notice, again, if you're not seeing this, I'm just discussing it. So if you're just in audio only, that's fine. But this could be I'm not going to say that. I was going to say it could be even smaller, but this shirt fits me well in the way that, I can feel what it means for clothing to fit. And that's the whole thing, is just getting in touch with our own bodies. But again, the shoulder rotates here. It pivots here. It turns, it reaches, it moves at the socket. And so the seam of the clothing needs to be at the socket. Otherwise, your shoulder is moving in a location where the clothing that's placed on it isn't, if your clothing doesn't fit in the correct location. And that just doesn't mesh. It doesn't happen. So now your body's taking a beating. Your clothing's not going to care. It's just a piece of fabric. And a lot of times just entirely fake nowadays, which we should never have on our bodies. It's not my opinion. It's not like a belief or something. It seeps into the pores. You're wearing an unnatural piece of anything on your body and you sweat or get hot, your pores open up and whatever that is seeping into you. Polyester, for example, which is an extremely common material to make clothing out of in 2025 and recent time back, but it didn't exist decades back and then ever before then. But it's so common right now, it's just oil. Just as plastic is just oil. Polyester is just a form of plastic. It's just oil. And so it's placed onto you, and then you're sweating in it, working out if you choose to do that, which you shouldn't because you don't need to allow your body to work. But your pores will open up when they get warm, and that's how sweat comes out of your body, it has to come out through something when there's skin. So whatever's placed on you seeping into you. You go to the doctor, they'll give you a topical cream sometimes, something that you rub on your body like lotion, and it's intended to go into your body to heal you. There's patches, things that people stick onto their bodies that do the same thing, go through the skin into the body. So unnatural clothing just will, and it's going to alter your body now from the inside as well as just anything it's doing outside is what I mean, because it's altering the body from the outside also. Anything unnaturally feeling, the body's going to want to get away from. So the muscles will deactivate to try to get away from it, but they can't get away from something that's placed on it that doesn't leave when it's on it. So, right, it just is what it is. There's no opinion to this stuff. So anyway, that's where the tops need to sit on the human body. Now, I talk about in the Image Clothing Company having two prerequisites. Really, it's just two things that have to happen to not change the body. The first ones are technique of shoelacing that we use. I'm saying this in a different voice almost than I normally do, in a different tone, because I just want it to be what it is. Because I don't want somebody to think oh, now he's trying to get us to do stuff. No, the shoelacing technique that In the Image Clothing Company uses just shapes the shoe the only way that the human foot is actually shaped. But with the technique, there's not only lacing of shoes, but then we tie the shoes as well. That's two separate things. Lacing is just how the rope is weaved over the top of the feet, but then tying a knot to hold the shoe on is a separate thing. So there's lacing and tying when it comes to shoe laces. And we have to tie our shoes evenly. There's a center line to the body, right? As we discussed, as we established, as I said, don't believe me, but it's just the truth. So one of the absolute biggest things that is altering human beings' bodies, and shoes are clothing, but it's shoe laces. The feet support the body from the foundation of it being just the lowest point of where gravity is going to have effect on it, upward, like a building, like within the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're commanded to build our foundations of just a human being as we are on the rock of our existence, which is Jesus Christ. So, I mean, because Earth just works, the planet that we have, from the center outward. Gravity pulls us to the center. Our bodies pull from head to toe, downward. The feet are the lowest point. So if they're altered, the entire body is. It's like what I said about fingernails and toenails. You can wear all your clothing fitting you correct to where your body's not being pulled or pushed or twisted or anything from your clothing. But if your shoe, well, yes, shoelaces, definitely. But even your shoes in general and everything that goes with that are altered at all and altering your feet, then your entire body's out of whack, right? All the rest of your clothing is so ideal in the way that just the only way the body works, but then your shoes have any kind of alteration they're doing to your body. That's the foundation of your whole being. It's like building a skyscraper, but you missed something in the foundation of it at the very base, and the whole thing falls over. But the rest of it from there up was entirely built correct, right? So the feet are just the most important thing, really, if we can say that there is something, because everything's just as important as everything else, or it wouldn't be there. But yeah, the shoelace technique that we show, it's nothing, there's no opinion. It's not like we're going to try to give you some kind of like super shoe, you know? I mean, it's just, you're going to put your shoe on like that and feel like it's not on there besides the weight of it. And if it's unnaturally shaped, you know, and well, gosh, I mean, yeah. So we tie our shoes evenly. We tie our shoes over toward the inside, to the center of the body. Again, anytime the feet go anywhere away from the center line of the body, it's like what I was saying about holding something in the front of you, in the middle of your body with your hands, versus holding your arms all the way out to your sides and trying to hold the same amount of weight. So much harder. Like many, 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 many times harder to hold the same amount of weight farther away from your body than it is at your center line. The feet, they point forward. They just do. It's one of those things that I think some people think it's like a genetic thing. Like people are pigeon-toed, or people have feet that are shaped this way and that way. People study wear patterns on the bottom of shoes. It's false. It's a lie. It's a myth. It's a whatever. Not that people are intentionally lying, but sometimes they are to get sales of orthotics and shoes and arch reconstruction surgery and things. A lot of times people really do lie about it. They really do know, and they know they can, get money from lying. Okay, if they don't know, then that's not their fault. We can't be held accountable for what we don't know. But yeah, the feet just only do what they do. So our shoelacing technique will just shape everything that the lace of the shoe will cause to happen and react to the foot. It will shape that the way the foot's shaped. So, but tying the shoes evenly over toward the inside will allow them to just operate in the way they naturally work. And naturally, the arches within the feet, they grip inward toward the center of the body, where the body's just going to use the least amount of energy. Like I said, how posture is a myth, and I discussed how it is. It's not my opinion. Collapsed arches, unless you have some kind of like very, very specific medical condition where you have like, I don't know, weakening muscles in ways because they're deteriorating because of some kind of like autoimmune disorder. I mean, it's something like that, like an internal kind of like something that's causing your muscles to just like weaken. And that, sure, times and places, but there's no such thing as collapsed arches otherwise. There really isn't. It's just you're placing something onto your feet, or you're placing your feet onto something like shoe soles, or you're tying a rope, which is all that a shoelace is, in ways that your foot isn't shaped. And so it can't operate the only way that it's designed to because of that. So we have to have the technique that we show, and it's not about us. I mean, it doesn't matter if there was ever an In the Image Clothing Company to have. It's just the only technique to put a rope through a shoelace eyelet set and tying them evenly over toward the inside, centered, All that combined is the only way that anything is going to be allowed to be called a shoelace and not alter the human foot. That's all that it is. And then again, like I say, no stretch because it's unnatural. The body can't, the feet are trying to activate their natural gripped arches and they pushing against, because the top of your feet really do push against the laces a lot when you're just wearing shoes. So the top of your foot is pressing against a stretchy thing. If there is any kind of stretch within the shoe material or the laces or anything that is anything that is anything that is anything that is placed on a human being, and it can't activate against something that's uh, moving. I mean, it's like trying to do push-ups on an air mattress or a waterbed versus a nice firm ground that ideally has some texture, right? Like as if we were just outside and there's dirt or grass and you're doing push-ups on it. You can't do push-ups on a wiggly air mattress or waterbed. Your feet can't activate their arches naturally against stretchy shoelaces. It's also very important for shoelaces to be round. It's just natural. I mean, round is a very natural thing. Rocks, as they roll through the bed of a river, they get rounded. Tree trunks are rounded. Things in nature are just round. It's very uncommon for things to be flat. I mean, sure, things can seem flat. I mean, blades of grass and leaves, but they have so much texture to them. Textures in it just natural. There will always be texture in nature to the degrees and ways that there is. Even ice, as slippery as it is, there's a lot of texture to it. More than like a finely smooth flooring of concrete or wood. You see how I'm settling in? I'm so grateful for this episode of In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 60, titled Workouts. This is awesome. We're going. We're going to keep going. It is amazing. It just already is. So the shoelaces need no give. They have to have no give in them because then the feet can just activate and they hit something. Oh, good. The muscle's just working and they're not trying to like combat this water bed like your hands doing a push-up on it, right? So yeah, there's a title of In the Image Clothing Company Podcast, meaning an episode titled No Give. And I went into all sides of what I did go into discussing that. So you can go find that if you'd like. The thing with shoes, right? If we're just walking on the earth, nothing placed onto our feet, and the earth will always be there. The human body is something we didn't design, so it's just what we're addressing anyway, right? It's going to only do the only thing that it actually ever will do. Just operate how it's designed to. Our feet would be flat on the earth, okay? We're stepping over things that are unnatural and textured, but I said, not because I said, but it's the truth. The human body loves texture. Naturally, there's always texture of some type in nature, okay? Again, even as slippery as ice is, there's texture to it. Ice is one of the most, like, flat when it's frozen on like the surface of a lake and slippery or non-textured things that we could think of, but there's texture to it, right? So the human feet would just naturally be on the earth flat, right? Yeah, sure, the earth is a globe and it's round, but the surface of it is flat, right? So large that it's flat in a small area, meaning like, yeah, there's texture, but only where there's texture. And everywhere else is just pretty well even. You know, I mean, dirt's just pretty flat. I mean, just walk outside and look, and it's just flat. I mean, I live in Utah, in the United States of America. We've got big mountains, but like just as far as the ground itself, it's flat, okay? So never will the human body operate naturally through the entirety of it. Remember what I said about a building and its foundation, the gospel of Jesus Christ and having a foundation on Jesus Christ himself. The human body and the feet being the lowest point with an earth with gravity pulling us straight down, the base of our feet have to be flat on the earth. Okay? However uneven the earth is, our feet don't need, because they would never naturally have anything under them hooked to them that is shaped any kind of way. Okay? So anytime you have an elevation in a shoe on the bottom of it, to where the heel of the shoe is any higher than the front, I mean any higher, period and done, just because it never would be if there wasn't something placed onto the feet, man-made, which is what shoes are. We can't tell the body what to do. We can't alter how it works because we want to wear a certain type of shoe. We will have pain, period and done, because we have altered the only way the body works in that case. So shoes have to be entirely flat on the bottom. There's a term that they use called a zero drop, just meaning there's no drop from heel to toe. If you're looking for shoes that are flat, a lot of people will brand their shoes as that if they know that they are flat. Now, ideally, our shoes are as thin as they can be while still providing the protection that we need on the bottom of them, because the feet, like the hands, work around things and they grip. There's a lot of grip within the bottom of the feet. Those arches grip inward. It's just the way that they work. I mean, it's just the way that the foot is shaped. You see how the hand like slants downward? And you can see on your own hand, right? I mean, the index finger comes down, but really like from the center of the hand outward, it slants down. And when you're doing things, your hands actually grip kind of inward, sort of, right? Because again, that neutral wrist is straight out from the outside of the forearm down the pinky. And so from there, the rest of the hand's like on the inside. And so they work like inward, again, toward the center of the body, toward the spine, where the nervous system stems from, where everything's easier to do at. Right now, my legs are crossed over each other as I'm sitting on the ground, and like I'm really tucked in. My core has been activated this entire time, as it always is, because I allow my body to work. I'm the founder of In the Image Clothing Company. I'm not mocking, but it just has to happen. It's so unfortunate. Truly, I mean, this is real emotion that's coming out. Like you can hear, I settled into it, like I mentioned earlier. So the feet, they need to be able to grip. They need to be able to feel all the texture that's underneath them, because that's how all the muscles can work together. That's how they're using all their range of motion that they have and are given by our God, and the only way that they actually work. So if you get a thick shoe sole, something that doesn't have any give in it, that's just something that's like strapped to the bottom of your foot that would never be there unless we did that to it. And we didn't design the way that the feet work. So they have to be able to just be feeling to the best of what we can, again, while providing protection, because that's what the intention of wearing shoes is. So yeah, thin shoes on the bottom, completely flat, heel to toe, but then also just your feet have to be able to work. As far as the shape of the shoe on the inside of it has to be shaped the way your human foot is shaped. Otherwise, it's altering the way that your human foot is shaped. And the feet are huge because, like we're discussing, they're the foundation of the human being. On an earth with gravity, they're the lowest point. Everything from there up is altered if they are, and greatly. So, and then we get into these chronic patterns. Like I said, I mean, scar tissue creates to try to support the body when the feet aren't allowed to do their natural job. Like I was saying, if fingernails aren't allowed to do their natural job, scar tissue will create within the hands and the forearms and between all these bones that are in the hands. And yeah, I mean, the neutrality of the body, which is, again, the only way that actually naturally dwells, unless it's out of that neutral to do something, but then it comes back to it, that'll be altered. So yeah, it's huge. The feet have to just be unaltered. And they are so important. They're the foundation of the human being. And so that's how we're going to allow that to happen, is those things I just discussed. Because it's so common nowadays for shoes to be so weirdly shaped, unnaturally squishy on the bottom. We want the soles to be very firm. Because if you're walking on the earth, it's very firm. It's like what I was saying about an air mattress. Try to walk around on an air mattress. You know, you could twist your ankle because it's just unpredictable. But there's nothing in nature like that, unless stuff you're trying to get off of, right? You're walking in mud. You try to not, if you can help it, right? You try to walk on some firm earth. So walk on a firm shoe sole. There's a lot of very terribly designed shoes nowadays. Yeah, I mean, bluntly will I say that. So anything that's branded as a workout shoe, if it's got any kind of squish to the bottom of it, your whole body's deactivated in the degrees that it is being affected by that squish to the shoe sole, right? Walking on the firm earth versus walking on an air mattress, okay? Or a marshmallow. That's how some of these shoes are nowadays. Your whole body is struggling to try to stabilize when it doesn't need to be struggling. If you were to just take the shoes off, your body would work just fine as far as, you know, what the shoe is either doing or not doing. If you take it off, your body, that's how your body's designed to work, is with nothing on it, really. But we wear clothing for the reasons we do. We need to stay modest. It protects us from our environment. There's a lot of things and reasons we wear clothing, and it will always be something human beings do, and it's a very great thing. But the body's designed to work as if it didn't have any possible restriction from clothing. So that's what we're trying to do, is get the closest that we can in the operation of it, to as if it doesn't have clothing on it, but definitely wearing clothing and staying modest and protected from our environment. So, yeah, if your shoe is weird, right, as far as just what I've described here, because that's just the way the body's designed, I didn't do it, I didn't decide it. Anything that's going to oppose just how the body's going to work, shoe-wise, travels through the rest of your body more than anything else does because of gravity and the fact that the feet are our foundation, okay? So it's so common, too, for something to be branded as a shoe to work out in, but then it's squishing your toes together, okay? I mean, your toes will just only do what they do. I discuss how you got your hand and you put it in a glove that's shaped any way that the hand isn't. Your hand can't quite work naturally. But there's that saying that I've heard so many times, and maybe the whole globe says it in ways or forms, but something that fits well to the human body, we say it fits like a glove. And I think the big reason is because the hand has so much operation that if you have a glove on it that's not shaped the way the hand is, it's not going to even be able to work the way that it's designed to, the only way that it does. So, when you're wearing a glove, you want it to fit snug, really quite snug, but without restriction. That's how shoes should be. So anything that's altering the way that your foot's going to naturally be, your whole body's taken effect in a not so ideal kind of way, in a really damaging way. So, yeah. Arch support, it's a myth. I don't want to brush over it. I won't. I just, I've said some of this stuff quite often within the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, talking about the anatomy of the human body, within the last episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, episode 59, titled Running. But arch support is a myth because it's like what I was saying about when you're walking around, you're just on the ground and it's flat until it isn't. But those moments when you were to possibly step on something that isn't flat, that thing doesn't get stuck to the bottom of your foot, and then you walk around with that thing stuck underneath your foot all the time. That's going to be annoying. Right? I mean, you step on something and it does stick to the bottom of your foot, you try to take it off because it's altering the way you walk. So arch support is essentially like stepping on a big piece of gum, like chewing gum or something really sticky, tree sap, and it's like now underneath your foot in the center of it, let's say, where the arch support, quote unquote, would be, and now you're walking around with like gum or tree sap under your foot arch. You're going to try to get that off of there because it's going to alter the way you walk. But then they brand something as quote unquote arch support, which you cannot do. An arch is strong because of the top. An arch is one of the most strong structures, physics-wise. I mean, just the way that it is, just the truth behind it, the way that an arch works. What makes it so strong is weight on the top of it. And if you bring something from the underside, underneath the arch, from the center of underneath the arch, and try to support, quote unquote, the arch, you will collapse the arch. So, yes, arch support's a myth. There's no opinion. There never could be. Again, take off your shoes, and that's how your feet are designed to work, unaltered. Underneath them, there's going to be a natural gap with a good arch, a naturally healthy, gripped arch. The muscles that go from your toes to like your heels, or that come down from your calf, right on the rear of your lower leg, those calf muscles that come down and wrap around the base of your heel and go like through your bottom of your foot. Again, muscles only work if they get shorter. They don't work elongated or stretched or lengthened. And that's when an arch support, quote unquote, the myth that people try to do, arch support, quote unquote, actually is lengthening those muscles. All the muscles under your feet, they have to grip like this to get shorter. You place something under there and it's pressing that muscle and stretching it out. It's pressing into all those tendons under there and stretching them out. And they can't grip, they can't grab, they can't activate. So now what you've done is actually taken something that's labeled and branded as a support to the human being quote unquote arch support, and you've weakened the entire body from its foundation. There's no opinion. For eternity, from the beginning to the end of a human being's existence, that is how it is. That's what happens. I don't care what your podiatrist says or what your doctor says. A podiatrist is a foot doctor. I don't care. I don't care what anybody ever tells you. You're a physical therapist, you're blah, 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 right? I could go through all the things. I don't care because it's not my opinion. I don't get to decide it. I didn't design the human being, but I have one, and so do you. And if yours is in pain, but you have quote unquote the absolute myth, though, of all arch support, that's why your body's in pain in the ways that that's causing your body to be in pain. Meaning, even if you had no other clothing on, again, just out of, let's look at this as an example, hypothetical, the only thing you wore was shoes, they were laced and tied correct, meaning, again, just the only way the human foot is shaped. And they had a proper shape of the sole to where there's room for your feet. The soles were thin and flat on the bottom. There we go. Okay, everything about the shoe is entirely shaped the way the human foot is, and it's just as if you've taken something and just like put it around your foot as protection, because that's all that shoes are and how they should be, or else we're altering the entire body from its foundation, the lowest point of it on an earth with gravity. Now you have that like ideally shaped shoe that's just, nicely sitting around your feet, and that's great. You place quote unquote arch support in there, and again, within this hypothetical, you have no other clothing on just to see what this arch support, quote unquote, will do to your entire body. Your whole body, to the top of your head, to the tips of your fingers, is altered in many, many ways and damaged because you have tried to support a structure that is strong from weight on the top of it. But your support, quote unquote, is from underneath. So arch support is a myth, period, and done. Don't believe me, but it is the truth. I don't care what anybody says, because I don't care what I say as far as I could say anything. It doesn't mean I'm right or correct about it, and I can't change it. The human body is designed the way that it is, and an arch is just a structure in physics, in, geometry, if you will. It's just a structure, and it's within our bodies, and it only does what it does. So there we go. Okay. Now, the first prerequisite being shoelacing and tying. And I discussed how that is. Secondly, in the Image Clothing Company, we say, and it's not because we say, I can say how I can word it like that, but I don't want it to sound like we're trying to get you to do something. It's just, again, the only way the body works, we have to remove all the tags from within our clothing. If there's a tag, like anything that's a label of any kind placed within clothing, giving information of any kind, that's the reason they do it. Whether it's the brand, the country of origin, the material it's made out of, the sizing, the washing and drying instructions, whatever it is and all that it is. Where the materials were sourced from, right? All the things, the dates, everything, anything and all things, the patents, the copyrights, the trademarks, blah, 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 blah. Everything and anything that is a label placed into the clothing that is different than the clothing itself. Sewn onto it, sewn into it, stitched into it in any kind of way, even if it's the same material as the clothing, but it's additional to just the item of clothing itself, anything placed inside of clothing that's already placed on you is altering the body. If it's a material the body can't activate against, like we talk about the stretchiness of things, relating it to doing a push-up on an air mattress for the hands not being able to stabilize, or walking on an air mattress for the feet not being able to stabilize. Stretchiness within shoe laces on the tops of feet, so that when the arches come up, they can't have a definitive endpoint of where the activation is, and so they actually deactivate, and the whole body goes deactivated as well, right? Any item of clothing with stretch, same thing with anything slippery within the body. It's like in nature. Try to walk on a very grippy, textured piece of earth, right? Dirt with some rocks here and there, or even grass, or just naturally growing plants and foliage or whatever, right? Versus walking on ice. Ice is very slippery. It's very hard for the body to walk on. You're using so much extra stabilizing muscles clear to the tips of your fingers, all the way up to the tops of your shoulders, the tip of your head, all throughout your entire body, because the bottoms of your feet, whether you had shoes on or not in this case, walking on ice, it's not stable on the bottoms of the feet. The entire body then is compensating and trying to overly stabilize to just make up for the lack of texture that ice has versus dirt, okay? Clothing, this 100% cotton button-up shirt that I'm wearing right now. If you can't see it, if you're only listening in audio form, that's fine, right? You can get what I'm saying. This has texture to it. And my muscles, the sensory nervous system of the external skin organ of my fleshly being, the epidermis. I mean, right? How smart am I? The sensory system of the body can feel the texture of the shirt and it can activate against it. It can predict it. There's no stretch within it. There's no give to it. I can do this. I'll pull on the tail of my shirt. Listen. There's a definitive endpoint. The body likes the texture. It likes the grip. If there's a tag placed within it that's made out of a man-made slippery synthetic material, the body can't activate against that. It's like the feet walking on ice versus walking on dirt. Slippery synthetic materials versus nice, natural, 100% cotton in this case, and that's what I say is the ideal. You don't got to believe me, but it's natural. It's something that grows out of the earth just as we do. We just become what we eat, okay? We're just a human being. We will return to the earth because we came from it. Biblical, doctrinal, the truth of all things, the gospel of Jesus Christ, human being, okay? So unnaturally stretchy things, unnaturally slippery things are going to alter the body. So any tag that's placed in there, if it's slippery, the muscles are not activating against it. They're trying to reject it. They're trying to avoid it because it's not something they want to be against, and they have no say because it's inside of clothing. Now, like I said, even if there was a little piece of material that had a print of all the information they put on clothing tags, but it was something they sewed into the shirt that wasn't the shirt itself, and so it was like excess thickness or stiffness or whatever comes from just, doing that, that's causing a gap. Now, synthetic slippery tags, they're much thinner than if there would have been this layer of cotton placed again into the clothing with information on it as a tag, but they also cause a gap in the way that they do. So if you have a tag within the rear of your shirt, between those shoulder blades, and I mentioned those upper, middle, and lower trapezius muscles that pull together. Muscles can only contract to work. They cannot elongate and push away. They pull together, two endpoints to the center of those endpoints. That's what those traps are doing on the rear of the upper back. And all the muscles, there's rhomboids in there, right? And the rotator cuff is going all into the scapulas. The rotator cuff is multiple muscles that play into those big bones on your upper back that allow them to really do all the functions that they do. Okay, we can get into the anatomy, but just the point being, all the muscles on there are contracting to the center of the body in the rear, which is the spine. And now you have an item of something that is not only the clothing, but something additional placed inside of it, being a tag, where those muscles are trying to contract to, and they're hitting against it, and they're trying to avoid it. So all those muscles will deactivate. Now your shoulders come toward the front of your body. That's what is happening, okay? So that happens anywhere and everywhere. I always say, even within the tongues of the shoes, but anywhere inside the shoes, because the slipperiness, your ankles have a lot of natural activation to them. There's no need for a foot if there's no ankle, right? There's no need for a hand if there's no wrist, if you can see what I'm saying. So if your ankle has a slippery synthetic tag against it, your feet, being the foundation of you, don't even matter if your ankles are altered. Meaning, right? Or just going the other end, from the feet being the foundation, coming up through the whole body. If the feet are unaltered, but then you get to the ankle, and they're unaltered, they're altered, because there's a slippery synthetic tag when the ankles are trying to activate and they feel that slippery synthetic tag and they're trying to be like, whoa, I can't quite predict this, and so they can't activate natural. Then from the ankle up through the entire body, deactivation is happening. As I said, not because I did, but because it's the truth. If anything within the body is inhibited in any way, something else and many things will have to compensate within every single breath, right? Every single millisecond, as small as you could get of time increment, the whole bodies are altered if something in it isn't working the way that it's designed to. It has to do a compensation. Imagine walking around with an ankle that didn't function at all. You get a sprained ankle and your whole body is like taking a beating. You're having shoulder pain and back pain and hip pain because of your ankle, right? But if the tag, being something we don't really think about, some people never have. I never did until I until around when I was starting to do all I was doing to then, end up founding In The Image Clothing Company. I never thought about tags and before then, really, except for being a kid and being like, this is scratchy, I want to take it off, and sometimes cutting tags out. But we have to remove all tags from every part of anything within clothing. Otherwise, your body's altered. So you're going to the gym and you're trying to train your body doing like rows or lat pull downs or pull-ups or any kind of thing like that, where you're trying to get your body really just closer to the way that it's naturally going to be, really, right? The shoulders closer to the center of the spine in the rear. That's what like a pulling motion is. And what you're doing is pulling those muscles together, and in the center of them, really in the center of your whole being, where your nervous system is stemming from, the spine, right? Comes from the brain, through the brainstem, down through the spine, and spans out through the whole body. There's a tag placed there. So those rows aren't actually doing what those rows would normally be doing, because there's a thing that's actually placed in the exact location of the muscles you're trying to train, okay? All right, so now that I've discussed clothing to the degree that I have, we also need to keep everything off of things, right? Pant cuffs off the top of the feet. Sleeve cuffs off the hands. Otherwise, they're just being altered. Period and done. On the main side of In The Image Clothing Company, I have videos titled both of those things. I normally title things how blank, right, insert whatever it is, affects body mechanics. So I've got one of those for pant cuffs, for sleeve cuffs, for so many things within clothing. Okay, a lot. I mean, we've got 150 plus videos on the main side of In The Image Clothing Company, and they're very informational. So I'm not going to talk so much about clothing anymore. We're going to talk about workouts now. I'm going to get into motions of things. The device that I'm filming this on does say 10% battery remaining. We'll be good. If it cuts, though, it cuts. Okay, but let's get into this. All that I was talking about up until this point as well, though, was just the same as if I was just talking about workouts as far as like specific movements, because the whole thing is the human body. You're not going to a workout. You're not going into a workout to accomplish a workout. You're going into a workout to address your human flesh. So, yeah, everything I've said up until this point right now, within this episode of In The Image Clothing Company Podcast, episode 60, titled Workouts, is just as exactly talking about workouts as if I were to have like mentioned all these sets and reps and exercises and workout routines and workout equipment and positions and motions and full ranges of motions, time under tension, calories, macros, push versus pull, a push-pull split, push-pull legs, right? Whatever times the 1,000th. Calisthenics versus aerobics versus Tai Chi versus, right, weightlifting, powerlifting. What do you want to get into, right? CrossFit versus just cardio only versus anything we could talk about, okay? Any end of everything. Bodybuilding versus the strongman competition versus people who do marathons versus people who do triathlons, right? I mean, all the anything and everything we could talk about, what I've said within clothing is saying all that, because all that is addressing the human body's function. But you're doing all that and any of that and everything of that, unless you're doing it entirely without clothing, which is very, very, very rare, then you're doing everyone and anyone and all of those things that the human body ever does, a physical function within clothing. So the clothing is determining how you are doing those things, unless you're being as intentional as you can be. And you can listen to what we say at In The Image Clothing Company, and don't just blindly believe us, but take the truth within it. And we show the truth of how to allow clothing to not restrict the human body, and then go do those things if you want and where you choose and how and what, allowing your body to work the only way that it does, okay? This is beautiful. I love this, personally, genuinely, and gratitude out the wazoo is how I'm going to word it, okay? Just because I love this. So, but the thing is, as I said, the body's designed to pull. The body, when your body's naturally working how it does, after X amount of time of being in unnatural positions, when you get your body back to just as if it had never been altered, right? Or as if it's not altered in its current time, like I'm sitting right now. My body's not altered right now. My clothing is not pulling on my body at all right now. My sleeve cuffs are off my hands. They can move. My shoulder seams are not altering my shoulders at all. My pant waistline isn't altering my hips at all. My pant cuffs are off the top of my feet entirely. My feet are in barefoot shoes. Shout out to XERO shoes, the brand. I don't have any affiliation with them as of today's date, but as I've said, I'll shout them out till the day that I die, even if they never, like, quote unquote, give me anything, because they've given me these shoes in the sense of I've been the one to purchase them, right? As far as like they didn't give them to me, but they made them and made it possible for me to be able to have them. So yeah, I'm wearing those. They're laced and tied correct. The tags in them aren't actually entirely removed, but I've gone through and made a bunch of little slits in them with a knife to give them a lot of texture, as if they're not there, because the inside of the shoe has texture, and so now the tag does as well. I have my socks on. I have them on correct, where you pull them up and slightly follow that outward curvature of the leg, because the lower leg naturally outwardly curves from the base of the heel up to the knee, right? And so my body's not being altered at all right now. It's not about me. I'm just saying I know all this, and I speak all this, and I share all this truth out of personal experience. And so, like, if I were to go do any kind of exercise or workout, quote unquote, which I wouldn't do for the intention of a workout, but if I were to just go do something like playing volleyball tonight, I played volleyball tonight with my body working just as it's working right now, sitting here staring into this camera. Okay? And a lot of people will go play volleyball in a certain item of clothing or attire of clothing. They'll sweat excessively because their body's being altered by that clothing, for all the reasons it is. If it's the synthetic material, if it's stretchy, if it's the angles of things that's just altering their body, especially like heels on shoes, right? Altering the feet in any way. Shoes laced and tied incorrect, meaning just any way that is not the only way that the human foot is shaped. All these things, plus any and everything that could happen. Drawstrings, that's a huge thing I want to make sure and mention. When we tie a drawstring around our waist, we're just taking something and going around the circumference of our waist. I discussed that the waistband of pants just, I showed just what it is, I guess, right? It doesn't matter what I say about it, but I just discussed what it is. But you take a drawstring and it's just a rope around the waist, around the whole circumference of the body. And so if you tie one side of it over the other, you're twisting the entire pelvis. You take a drawstring, put it around you, and you cross the left side of that over the right side and tuck it and tie it. You've taken your entire pelvis, and it'll go forward, anterior, right, and to the left. You take a drawstring, put it around your waist, and tie the right side of it over the left, cross it under, tie a knot. You've taken your whole pelvis and put it forward, anterior, right, and to the right. That's just what's going to happen. The pelvis is going to twist and move the ways that a rope around the waist is going to cause that to happen. That's what happens. So anytime you're doing any kind of workouts within a drawstring and it's not tied as evenly as you can possibly get it, and I use a slipped lap knot, LAPP, and when you tie that, the end that you can look up how to tie it anywhere in a book about knots or on the internet or whatever, right? The side that's just the single loop, you've got one side that's more of like a twisted loop, and then you've got one side that's just a simple single loop. Make sure when you do tie a slipped lap knot around your waist, to tie it to where that single loop side is looping toward the center of your body. You don't want to tie it anywhere else because, again, everything goes to the center. That way it stays within that gap of where the knot is and presses against you, and it's a nice, even pressure against you, okay? The slipped lap knot is a slip knot that just allows a rope to be tied to where when it gets pulled, first of all, it slips, which is beautiful. It's easy to, put your pants on and off and do whatever you need to do when it comes to loosening or tightening a knot around your waist. But then also it just pulls completely horizontal. So your hips aren't twisted because, anything you ever do with a rope around your waist that's twisting it, it's one of those things that's as obvious as it is once you see it, but we can't be held accountable for it because, I wore gym shorts, synthetic, unnatural, stretchy material, first off, which is damaging, tags in them, secondly. Thirdly, stuff in my pockets, which that's huge to mention. Never have anything in your pockets. Well, just ever. Not just only when you're doing a workout, but your entire body's being altered. Those hip flexors and quadricep muscles we talked about, if they have things pressing against them, altering them, and deactivating them, changing the position of your pelvis, well, then it doesn't matter what workout you want to do. You're altering your body just by having things in your pockets, front, rear, and the tops of shirts. Every button up you'll ever see me wear will never have a, I mean, I'm not perfect, first off, and I can't speak for the future, secondly, but I'm very intentional at this current time. I don't ever have pockets on the front of my button-up shirts because that alters the body greatly. And then anything placed inside of a pocket just amplifies the alteration, right? You're just holding that thing up with your body, the weight of it. As I said, a shirt alone, just the weight of a simple thin cotton t-shirt, 100% cotton, no tags, seams sitting correct, you're still holding a weight off the ground. However much that shirt weighs, you're entirely supporting that weight from the tops of your shoulders the entire time it's on your body. And so now anything else you place into pockets, meaning please don't ever place anything into your pockets for the health of your human flesh, it's going to alter your body as a whole. Again, anything in any degree, in any sense, in any possible way within the body that's being inhibited, the entire body has to do some sort of compensation. It only works as a whole. So anyway, yeah, whenever you're doing any kind of, because I made a video for the main site of In The Image Clothing Company one time titled, "People Don't Move Through Life, They Move Through Clothing." It's titled something very similar to that, because that's the case. Everything you're doing, if your clothing's doing any alteration to your body, you're actually just moving through your clothing. You're not like moving through your environment. So in The Image Clothing Company, right, we discuss how to just allow clothing to not alter the body. That's all we do. We don't do anything to the body here. Never will we. Because the whole point of our company is allowing, keyword. So you allow something to do something by leaving it alone, right? So that's what we do. But yeah, so the big thing with workouts though is anything that you're ever doing, if your core's not activated, you're already just damaging your body in that instance. As I have talked about, within, I think, as far as I'm aware, it was the episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled Designed to Work that I referenced earlier. I discussed how the body, if there's any time that it's deactivated, that's going to just be a problem. I mean, you're not going to get something, you're not going to like, yeah, I guess that's the whole thing. If you ever, that I'm saying here is what I mean, is the whole thing for this part of this, the core would always be activated. So, you go into any kind of workout, whatever part of your body you're training, you're doing a bench press, you're doing a pull-up, you're doing a row, you're doing like, I don't know, like some kind of lateral movement, like a unilateral thing, like a lunge or a side lunge, you're doing just squats, you're doing a barbell, anything, like, right? I mean, you're doing a deadlift, you're doing a clean with like a jerk and clean, a more full body type of thing, the way that we think about it within those communities, right? Or a pull up, but then you even go to a muscle up. You do a sit up. I don't know, right? I mean, crunches, leg lifts. You're doing isometric things, like you're doing a plank of some form. You're doing dips. You're doing, I mean, what do we want to talk about, right? Any kind of thing, period. I mean, I used to do workouts, like I said. I used to know what they would say to do. But the whole thing is, if your core is deactivated ever, while you're sleeping even, your body's being damaged. And so now if your core is deactivated at all, or if any part of your body is deactivated at all, if you don't have your natural open palm, your natural gripped arches within your feet, if your pelvis isn't in its natural neutral, posteriorly tucked position to where those core muscles are really working, and that spine is just neutral to keep the jaw neutral, because the jaw stabilizes your entire body. Through every breath, we breathe and it goes through the center of our jaw, our lower jaw, and you just notice it, especially if you're doing like a heavy lift in a workout. It's like, right? You're doing that kind of thing, almost clenching your teeth. Even if they're slightly apart, it's like you feel a lot of stuff in your jaw. If you notice it, you will. If you have. If you try to now, that's what I mean, you will. The jaw stabilizes the entire body. So a big part of imbalances that happen within the body when it comes to patternings that get created get stuck into the jaw. Like dental work will just alter the way that the jaw sits, and that alters the spine. And then obviously, well, if you don't know, you don't know. But the spine, if the spine's altered because of something that's like, actually just like currently happening, then the entire body is going to be altered. I mean, the only way your core can be activated is if your spine's in its neutral position. We really are about the skeletal system as human beings, not just as in the Image Clothing Company. It's the foundation, right? So the jaw being a skeletal thing, right? The jaw is just a bone, and the teeth are, I think the teeth are different than bones. I don't currently know exactly what teeth are, but they're similar to bones if they're not bones, right? I mean, that's the skeletal system, right? Yeah, just the function of the jaw, at least, right? So anyway, any lift, any exercise, any range of motion, any type of exertion in any way, but even just, like I said, sleeping, if your core is deactivated and you go into doing anything, you're already going into it in an unworking state of being. So you can try to train in the gym all you want. And I've talked about this in the past so many times. Like, you sit there and you do, your 4 sets of 10, 4 sets of 8, 4 sets of 15, 5 sets of 6, or, or whatever, right? I don't know. Your 3 sets of 20, whatever it is, of like sit-ups. And you're doing it, first of all, be careful, because if you're doing it within drawstrings that are just twisting your entire pelvis, then your body's damaged. You're doing it within shoes.